Dana Gould Hour.
Jungle worms and swamp rats run around your feet.
Well, why do I get hooked up with these spook details? Monsters, graves, bodies. Oh, all right.
Trick or treat, trick or treat, trick or treat on Halloween. Trick or treat on Halloween. Never any tricks, but lots of treats on your Halloween station. Here's a salutation, a musical treat from your Halloween station. Happy Halloween!
Hello, and welcome to the Dana Gould Hour Podcast's annual Halloween Spectacular. Or should I say, spooktacular. Get it? Not spectacular, but I took out spook and okay. What a show we have for you today. Mike McCarty and James Knight are here. They are brothers, even though they don't share the same last name. And they are the hosts of a new horror podcast called The Head, the Tail, and the Whole Damn Thing. Now, it's not your ordinary horror podcast, as you will soon learn. Now, I have known Mike forever. He is a special effects makeup artist who has worked on, Blade Runner 2049, Mindhunter, the new Exorcist, the Orville, Stand Against Evil, if anybody remembers that show. And his brother James is an actor and educator, and together they share a love of all things creepy and all things that go bump in the night, and most importantly, they're great guys, they're super funny, and they are here. Mike McCarty and James Knight. Also, Rob Zabrecki, or just Zabrecki, if you are a fan of his professional work. He is here. Rob is an actor, an author, a musician, a Valley kid, and he has since gone on to become one of our greatest living professional illusionists. And he is also a walking encyclopedia of all things magic. Magic with a C. I'll leave the magic with a K to the Lilith Fair group. Rob runs the Houdini seance at the Magic Castle, and he is here today to talk about the history of midnight spook shows. He is also performing one at the Mayan Theater this month here in Los Angeles. But we have him right here, right now, Rob Zabrecki. True Tales from Weirdsville takes us on a deep dive on Dracula. From Bram Stoker's book to Hamilton Dean's West End production in the 1920s, all the way up through Gary Oldman's Fright Wig. We will discuss which film version is closest to the book and why, and whether or not that's even a good thing. My answer may surprise you. We also have some surprises. Some neighborhood kids are going to come by, knock on the door. Now, where will I be this month? Oh dear. Well, as always, as you might guess, October and November are pretty busy. October 10th, 2024, the day I record this, marks Ed Wood's 100th birthday, and we have several events to mark that milestone. On October 20th, I'll be presenting a screening of Tim Burton's flawless biopic, Ed Wood, starring Johnny Depp, Martin Landau, Sarah Jessica Parker, Patricia Arquette, Bill Murray, and of course, George the Animal Steele. Can't make a movie without a star. That will be at the Gardena Cinema in beautiful Gardena, California. God's country. Ed Wood on the big screen with some surprise guests. On Thursday, October 24th, Plan 9 from Outer Space Live will return to Largo in Los Angeles with an all-star cast, including, in addition to yours truly, Matt Bronger, Frank Conniff, David Dastmalchian from Late Night with the Devil, Ron Funches, Paul Greenberg, Jackie Harris, Jonah Ray, Paul Scheer, Paul F. Tompkins, Janet Varney, and Kat Augustin as Vampira. Yes, I know she looks like her, and yes, I know it's weird. As for my stand-up schedule, on October 18th and 19th, I will be in beautiful Fort Collins, Colorado, at the Comedy Fort, one of my favorite clubs. And on November 7th, 8th, and 9th, I will be returning to the Punchline in San Francisco. And November 14th, 15th, and 16th, I will be at the Laughing Tap in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Tickets for all of these lovely evenings are available at danagould.com. So please, give a look-see. Lastly, we are supported more than anything else by our Patreon. And as always, as we say, if you like the show, please consider becoming a Dana Gould Hour Sky Cadet. Go to danagould.com and sign up for our Patreon. $5 a month. Get you some extra audio content, some video content, some junk. And there will always be an ad-free version of the show posted to our Patreon page. And now, the kids are at the door, so it is on to our filthy business.
Tune in, it's a gas. It's the Dana Gould Hour
It's a crisp autumn sun-dappled day high atop the Mulholland Drive view shelf. We are in the month of October, the only month that matters. I have two guests today, two human relatives. I listen to a lot of podcasts, unlike anybody here, and I listen to a lot of movie podcasts. Among my favorites, I really like What Went Wrong, which is a really great movie podcast. I like Blank Check a lot. Blank Check is great. And I heard about a new movie podcast called The Head, the Tail, the Whole Damn Thing. Now, obviously, that's a Jaws reference. So immediately I was like, oh, okay, well, this is probably something I'd like. And what it is, which the reason I found it interesting was they do two movies a podcast that are tangentially connected. And my first thought was, oh, great. They thought about it. They took 5 minutes and came up with something different. When podcasting first started and Mark Maron's podcast started to take off, people would come up to me and go like, hey, when are you doing a podcast? When are you doing a podcast like Maron's? When are you doing a podcast like Maron's? And I would think, I don't want to do a podcast like Maron's. Maron does a podcast like Maron's. I want to come up with something else. And then I finally stole something from someone else. And then we have what we have. And then as I looked up the podcast, I found out, hey, what do you know? One of the hosts is a really good friend of mine. And the other host is his brother. So welcome to the podcast. Podcaster, author, and special effects whiz, Mike McCarty.
Hi, this is Mike McCarty, and this is the sound of my voice.
And his brother, actor, teacher, author, podcaster, America's boy next door, James Knight.
I'm James Knight, and this is the sound of my voice. But we laugh exactly the same. So don't
Right
get
out-
confused.
Right
That's
out
true.
of the gate. Right out of the gate, your brothers with different last names. Is James Knight a professional affectation from Actors Equity of the Screen Actors Guild or something? Was there another
No.
James McCarty or?
Nope. That's actually my real name. Mike and I are actually half brothers, but we grew up together, so we typically don't say half brother because
Different mom or dad?
different dads.
Okay.
Same mom. She was setting up franchises.
Yeah,
Sure.
she got around.
Yeah.
My wife has met my brothers and insists that my mother had an affair. But it's clearly not true. Okay. So how old were you guys? Where did you grow up, and how old were you when you met?
Well,
who's the old? Did you?
I'm the oldest. I'm the oldest. So, we lived in Michigan and grew up there. And when my mom got divorced,
you're real Americans.
Absolutely.
Right.
Good Midwestern boys.
Right.
Yeah. So, my mom married his father, and then they had a child, obviously, James.
Right.
We grew up together on a farm for a long time, actually. And then we bounced around. We bounced around Michigan about every 4 years or so. Not because of a military thing, just because it was like, oh, let's pull up stakes and go over there. I mean, we weren't gypsies or anything, but
we did a bit of that.
Yeah.
So you were. Do you remember when James was even born? Like, how old were you?
No, I was 9?
Yeah. Okay. So Okay. So you don't. Yeah. All right. And I'm assuming that because the age difference was there a lot of bullying going on, or were you so older that it was more protective?
No, there was a very clear hierarchy going on.
Sure. Well, I have 4 older brothers, so I was.
But I don't know what he's talking about.
My name was Target.
When I was growing up, when we were growing up, I will say that I think Mike oftentimes hung out with kids who are younger than him, and I tended to hang out with kids who are older than me. So somehow we met in the middle. Were
you guys always monster nerds? Because the head, the tail, and the whole damn thing is a genre podcast. I'm assuming, at least for now. Well, maybe one day you'll get into The Verdict and Absence of Malice. It's like Count Floyd. It's a scary courtroom drama.
I think we were always monster nerds because I was a monster nerd, and I gotta say, I probably forced him into it. You were telling some story the other day, James, that I tend to forget. And it was about how, like, I would see a horror movie and then I would download it to him line by line and just say, and then this happened, and then this happened. And do you remember anything in particular, brother?
Yeah. No, I can remember the first time I learned of Creepshow. I essentially got the whole Creepshow premise, and then every vignette in the whole movie sort of just related to me in the oral tradition.
Yes. And how old were you at that point, do you think?
5, 6, going around the house saying, I want my cake.
That's the line. That Creepshow's 81, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, 81, because I was a junior in high school, and everybody, we didn't have a lot of options. Where I grew up right where you grew up, only in Massachusetts. I grew up in the middle of Massachusetts, and everybody, the movie come on, you go to the movies, and the next day, I want my cake. Everybody,
yeah,
that was the line. But that's an interesting story. I was telling my wife this the other night. When we were little, I mean, and I definitely got into genre stuff from my brothers and my mom. My mom loved the old Universal horror movies.
Ours too.
Yeah. She would let me stay up and watch. They had the horror movie franchise. What was the horror movie franchise you guys had in Michigan? Did you have a host?
Sir Graves Ghastly in Detroit,
right?
And then the Ghoul too.
Now, was the Ghoul, that wasn't Ghoulardi? That's a different one.
No, it was the guy out of Cincinnati or Cleveland. The guy out of Cleveland, yeah.
We didn't. Boston had one called Feep that was like a weird alien that I'm a little too young to remember. Then we had classic horror on Saturday nights at 11:30, and before SNL was a thing. And that's when my mother would let me stay up and watch the Universals. And then we had Creature double feature on Channel 56, which oddly fits your podcast.
It does.
Nice. Yeah, we had horror hosts, and we also had, I think, Channel 50, WKBD, had the Saturday Shocker. That's the one I remember the most. Yeah. And they would show like the schlockiest horror, like The Incredible Melting Man. I remember that one being out there.
Yeah.
Sure. And a bunch of other just like really B grade, C grade horror movies on a Saturday afternoon, right? I think was it right before or after Kung Fu Theater? It was a great double feature.
Kung Fu Theater just so great. My favorite horror host is Diddy, but let's move on.
It's a slippery slope these days.
Yeah, I think the problem is he did. But I remember, because you were talking about like downloading a movie to your brother.
Yeah.
I remember my mother telling us when we were little, your father and I watched the weirdest movie on TV last night. A meteor crashed into a little town, and then the lid came off and a snake head came up out of it. And then it looked like a weird fish. And we're like, what were you drinking, Mom? Yeah. And then when we finally watched War of the Worlds, we were like, holy shit. This is exactly what she described. It's like when you describe the movie, it sounds like a Robert Williams painting, and then you actually see it like, oh no, she was right. This is exactly what happened.
Yeah, just as bizarre as we thought.
Yeah, and the reason I was telling my wife that was because we watched it because she'd never seen it, and I forgot how churchy that thing is.
Oh sure,
it's super churchy at the end. There's a lot of the power of. It's not the germs that killed the aliens. It's the germs that God made that killed the aliens.
Indeed.
Welcome to 1954.
I got so many movies downloaded to me that way as a kid, and I remember also after Mike saw RoboCop, the first RoboCop, like him just itching to tell me all
about
its
famous sequel, RoboCop Goes Hawaiian.
Yeah. Well, you know what's funny is when RoboCop first came out, I remember seeing the ad standee, and it was like part man, part machine, all cop, and I went, "Fuck that! Who wants to see that? That sounds stupid." You know, at the time I was all like anti-establishment, like fuck cops. No, half robot, all cop, stupid. And then our mom, oddly enough, went to see it. I don't even know why. And she goes, "You have to see this movie." And I was like, right. And she's like, no, you do. And then I did, and I was like, holy shit, you're fucking right.
Yeah, no. Well, that's my friend Mike Meehan, who's a brilliant comedian who lives in San Francisco, has this character that he does on stage, and the Exorcist t-shirts. I actually have one. It's Mannion, half man, half onion, all cop. And it's a guy with an onion head holding a gun.
Yeah, like Manimal.
Yes.
Part man, part animal.
I smell scallions. Freeze! It's so yeah. Well, the director who directed RoboCop, Verhoeven.
Yeah.
All of his movies are satires of American culture. Like RoboCop is a satire of America's weird authoritarian police fetish. Sure. The same with Starship Troopers, is with sort of military colonialism predilections. And Showgirls is a parody of America's forever adolescent attitudes towards sex, that we cannot get French on this to save our lives. And but people didn't get it. It's like I feel that he either cut back on it just didn't work. You know, the people either didn't get the joke, or the joke wasn't obvious enough.
That was a movie that I went to a big group screening when I was working at K&B. A ton of us went to go, like, oh, we're going to go see Showgirls, because we knew it was just going to be the most god-awful, wonderful movie we'd ever seen. Yeah. Oof.
And that movie came out, was it 95?
Yeah, somewhere
about? Mm-hmm. Because I was told this by, I believe Larry Karaszewski told me this, who wrote The People versus O.J. Simpson with his partner Scott Alexander, who also wrote Ed Wood, but that one of O.J.'s first public outings, quote unquote, was after the verdict. He put on a disguise and went to the Beverly Center to see Showgirls.
Really?
Because he really wanted to see Showgirls. At
This
least he
movie's
didn't go
really
see-
underrated.
At least I thought he would go see How to Murder Your Wife at the Beverly.
He didn't need to see it.
Yeah,
So I married an
which is a
ex-murderer.
movie. Yeah, which is a movie. It's a Jack Lemmon movie. James, you are a professional actor. Mike, did you ever have any predilections towards that, or what was the split there?
I think I grew up being
James is
obviously
the
a fan.
good-looking one. Is that just the obvious thing? Yeah.
I grew up being a monster kid, right? Loving Halloween and getting into Tom Savini and, Grand Illusions and making my own movies. And I've even gotten in trouble when I was a kid, making my brother appear dead. I think, didn't I make some squibs?
Yeah, my brothers tried to do that too, but not in the way you're describing.
Here it comes. Right. This is a good story. Yeah, you made the squibs and got the starter pistol.
Yeah, I shot him in the front yard.
I'm like 9 years old, I think, when this happens. 9 or 10. Mike is 18, 19, and maybe getting into a lot of trouble in other.
So certainly areas. Old enough to know better.
Absolutely. And I made homemade squibs, firecracker, dump out half the, pull the wick out, put in an Estes rocket launcher, the whole thing. So it's on a trigger, right?
You're saying this like it's a common,
like everyone does.
You're in the right occupation, because you're saying, obviously I would just dump out half the charge and put in an Estes rocket launcher. And I'm like, what?
Well, at 10 years old, I learned how to do it too then, because they were like, okay, you're going to tape this mayonnaise jar lid to your chest, and we're going to hammer this T-shirt so that it blows open when the charge goes off.
And y'all have 10 fingers. Look at you, 10 fingers, 10 toes.
Yeah, we're looking good. So what happened after I shot you in the yard? What's the neighbors
across the street came out and started just absolutely screaming, and then we had to get up real quick and be like, because I was also I was a hammy little kid too, I think I was pleading for my life.
You're already acting,
pleading for my life, and he's got a starter's pistol, which I don't know where you got that from, but it doesn't actually fire anything. Remember. It's just what you use to start the race or whatever, and cracks one
in
off,
this case,
and I fall down.
In this case, it was an ender pistol.
But had to get up, had to run over, like I'm fine. It's all just fake. It's fun and games. But of course they told our parents.
I wouldn't be too funny with that. I wouldn't have been too happy.
It wasn't the first time Mike pissed off the neighbors. Just going back a few years before, growing up, sometimes he would download the movies. Sometimes just babysitting. He was like, "Hey, don't tell mom and dad, but tonight we're gonna watch a movie." So I saw like The Omen. I got a far too young,
right?
And then there were some other kids down the street.
Yeah, the O'Briens. I was babysitting the O'Briens, and
I never knew who would hire you to. I would never hire a teenage boy to babysit.
Yeah, and I was probably 14 or 15 at the time, something like that.
That is some Michigan shit that did not make it to Massachusetts.
So I go over to and I'd babysit them a few times, right? And he had HBO. And I was super excited because you remember when HBO first was around, you'd get the every month
the little guide.
the little booklet, and
it was like 4x4, like a 4x4 book.
Friday the 13th is on Friday at 8:00, and I was like, oh, Mr. O'Brien wants me to watch the kids. Okay, well, no, it's fine. So he knew it was on, and he goes, listen, whatever you do not watch Friday the 13th. I was like, yeah, of course not. I would never put the kids through that.
No problem.
Yeah,
no problem.
At 7:55, I'm like, listen, kids, okay, so we're going to watch this movie, but you can't tell your dad. And they were terrified. I mean, they were like probably 8 years old and 5 years old, and I'm forcing them to watch the original Friday the 13th, all those fantastic kills, like the Kevin Bacon arrow through the neck and all that. And at the end, the kids were so freaked out. And I had never seen the movie. I knew nothing about it. So, you know, she's calm. She's chopped off mom's head. She's in the canoe floating in the lake. And I get on my hands and knees and I'm moving up towards the TV because, you know, you didn't have a remote that time. And I'm like, look, see, kids, it's okay. The kids have been like crying and like, and I'm like trying to calm them down. I'm like, look, it's a happy ending. Everything is fine. And I get up right next to the TV. And that's when Jason launches out of the water and tackles her out of the canoe. And I had no idea that was coming. It scared the fuck out of me. And I jumped back and the kids screamed and I immediately turned the TV off and they couldn't go to sleep. And when Mr. Bryan came home, he was like very, very disappointed in me. Sure. I think that was the last time I ever did it.
That would be the end of it.
Yeah.
This was, by the way, back in those days when HBO was on. This was the music. Da 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 da.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna remember that.
Tonight,
I missed that.
Arliss. Oh.
I totally missed those old HBO days.
Oh yeah.
So did you get?
We were just. I sent Mike the thing for the ABC Sunday Night movie. Also, pretty iconic opening.
Watched that. That's so weird because I'm doing trailers from hell for Joe Dante. One of the trailers I'm doing is the Night Stalker trailer, and it has that. It's the same effect that they did in the Stargate in 2001. It's that tonight, you know, the ABC's coming at you like that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And the ABCs, that really scared me as a kid for some reason. That weird.
Sure. Well, and it was followed by that guy's voice who was like, "Tonight, the fog." You know,
that was
instantly
that was Ghoulardi. That's Ernie Anderson. That's Ghoulardi, Ernie Anderson.
Shit.
Oh, hell who is the father of Paul Thomas Anderson.
No way.
That's why his production companies. That's why his production company. If you look at his movies, it's Ghoulardi Productions.
Holy shit!
And there's a really brilliant. I might even put it on this podcast, or I'll send you the track. I'll have to dig it up. There's a CD that came out when CDs were a thing called Celebrities at Their Worst.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I remember everything. That. Right. I still have it. And the one of Ernie Anderson is just, "Tonight on the Love Boat." Fuck. Who the fuck wrote this goddamn Tonight? Spencer Verheyen. God damn it. Who says this fucking shit?
Robert Urich.
Exactly.
Tonight, on America's Funniest People, the studio audience will choose who will marry Papa. Tonight on the Marabamada.
You got something you can do? Because I'll kind of dick fuck around here and
call somebody.
You'll see an American gladiator's son walk his shit.
You'll see an American blah, 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 appliance. That's a big hole, but I can't do anything about it. You'll have to put some sound effects in there or some fucking pig whistles or something. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Mike, did you go straight in? Because I should say that you work for a great company called Autonomous Effects. We know each other because you guys did the effects on Stand Against Evil, and we became. I think I paid all my bills, so we're still on speaking terms.
Yeah, we're good. I first met you on Super Adventure Team. Actually,
that's right. That's what I was going to ask you. Were you at KNB when we were doing Super SAT?
Yeah. And I came down to set and did some. I remember there was an episode where someone needed to sing Kiss.
Yes,
and I was the only one that knew the lyrics.
Okay, great. Yes. That was from the episode Kiss My Embassy.
Yeah.
Isn't that how you got your SAG card, Mike? Didn't you get your SAG card from puppeteering that?
No, I got my SAG card from, I was Taft-Hartley and Wishmaster.
Oh,
and then The Haunting, I was puppeteering.
The Yondabont Haunting.
Yeah. Yondabont. Oh, that guy's
SAT's pilot had full frontal nudity, by the way. I like to say that. I forget what the character's name was. The Buck Murdoch was the leader. And then there was, I forget, the Doug McClure looking dude.
Yeah. What I remember most from Super Adventure Team is
me and Rob being jerks.
Yeah. And Nutmeg. The perfect combination of nuts
and Meg.
And also whatever he would interrupt somebody with. Fantastic. Which I still do all the time.
Yeah. I'm going to kill you tonight. Fantastic. The only thing about the Super Adventure team that I regret is Adam West was gonna do Buck Murdoch. He was happy to do it, and MTV quote thought he sounded old. Yeah,
Jesus.
just like when you just know when people are wrong.
Look where they are today.
When you talk to people in the business and you're just like, "Yep, you're wrong." I remember I pitched to Comedy Central the first version of Stand Against Evil, which was a different show, and the guy at Comedy Central, who was a friend of mine, said that, comedy and horror together don't work. They just don't work. And then about 4 months later, Shaun of the Dead came out.
Whoops.
Yeah, whoops. But so you went right into effects work. But you're also a writer. So did that come? Was you writing all along, or because you have a novel out? You wrote an episode of Creepshow.
I was always into writing, even as a kid. I remember you remember that Philip Marlowe HBO TV show with Powers Booth?
Yes.
It was great. And I remember I wrote
weird Powers Booth playing a good guy was, I think, the thing that threw everybody.
Yeah. I wrote like a 1940s detective thriller script at that time. And I was probably like 14 years old, And so I always just sort of had that bug. And then I got into, in high school, it was like slasher movies and horror movies and just really into that. Did the whole Tom Savini thing, was making our own movies on VHS, borrowing the school's cameras and, just having a blast. And so after a while, I was like learning through Fangoria magazine, like, oh, there's actually, you can make a living in Hollywood if you do makeup effects.
Right. And you came along at the right time.
I did. Yeah. I've been doing it like 30 years now, I guess. Right.
Can you still do that? Can you still have a career in effects? Because I know, it's like Cinefex used to be, I would love the photos of, like from Famous Monsters, the photos of John Chambers sculpting an appliance, or, somebody, it was like, you found out later, it's like James Westmore pops in with a paintbrush and then he's like, takes the photo and then he's gone.
Yeah.
It's like,
Stan Winston used to do that a lot too.
Yeah. And what is this? Doesn't matter, Stan. Get out.
Yeah.
But now it's just people sitting at a keyboard. It's not as exciting.
We still do a lot of physical stuff.
Yeah. Is there still a lot of practical
absolutely
stuff going on?
Practical effects are really making a huge comeback. And I don't know what spawned it, but I can't tell you how many times
I just think it's the natural. I think it's the natural yin and yang of human attention.
Probably. But you get a lot of producers nowadays who are like, we want to do everything practically. Right. And then you give them the budget for practical and they're like, I think maybe we'll cut this part out.
Well, yeah, there was a story of The Thing in 2010, which was a prequel to The Thing in 1982, which was a remake of The Thing from 1952, which is about a monster that replicates itself. They did all the practical effects, and then Universal went over them with CG. And
bad
it was
CG.
Bad CG, yeah. And there's nothing worse than bad CG. It's like,
yeah. You can find all that stuff on YouTube if you just search for it. ADI released full videos of all their test footage of stuff, and it's really amazing, all the shit that they did.
And I think it was just like it didn't look like a modern movie. Was that what their reasoning?
I'm not sure why. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me, to be honest. And nowadays they would be, yes, they would use it, the practical stuff. Unless, Alien Romulus, where you're doing that deep fake that I don't think either one of us were a fan of.
No, well, it takes you out of the movie.
Yeah.
Anything that jerks you out of the film, whether it's an effect or a director going, watch this.
Yeah.
Don't forget, I'm directing. So James, why didn't you do this?
Well, I think, just with the age difference between us, I just sort of always looked up to Mike and was following what he was doing. And I was, I was a hyperactive, spazzy little kid who, found a home sort of performing in front of people and things like that and helping them out. So
I know that feeling really, really well.
I didn't have a girlfriend, so I had a lot of time to think to myself. And
know that one. I know that one too. As I've said, now that I've worked out my emotional shit, I'll go into bars and beg strangers to love me.
But he went out to California when I was still pretty young. I think Mike moved out there when I was 19. And then I kind of always knew that I wanted to be an actor and performer, and I always had it in my mind, like, one day I'm going to move out to California. I'm going to be close to my brother, and we're going to work in movies together. And it's crazy to me, looking back at it now, that this podcast is really the first thing we've ever done together.
That's true. Yeah.
After all that time, despite the fact that sometimes it seems like we share the same brain. But I went to school for acting. And I actually,
you teach Shakespeare. You're like you're like a real actor.
Well, sometimes it feels like that. No, I've done sort of gun for hire just about everything. I did a lot of theater. I went to school for theater, but I've done TV and films and commercials and industrials and voiceovers.
When people talk about you, always talk about like, you guys are all so rich. It's like you're 90% of what an actor is. Like,
100%.
You make a living.
Yeah.
It's a solid middle class living if you're lucky.
And
and that's it.
I'm actually really lucky right now because I help run a theater in the suburbs outside Chicago, and that has given me like a sort of stable life.
Right.
I was doing the sort of gun for hire, gig to gig to gig thing in New York for about 13 years, and then I got to a certain age, and my wife and I were like, well, if we're going to have kids, we should give it a shot now. And then, just like it always does, it changed everything. And I was lucky enough to have made.
I know that feeling too.
I was lucky enough to have made connections so that when I threw out the net and said, hey, everybody, I'm looking for something stable.
Steady, yeah.
They gave this place out here, gave both my wife and I jobs.
Wow.
And they gave us the freedom to still audition for things in Chicago. Chicago has a big theater scene.
Great theater town. Great theater town.
It's got a great, it's got a TV scene as well. Not as robust, of course, as LA or New York. Yeah, of course. And my wife and I have done
before he dicks you. That's what we say in the business.
My wife and I have done all the Dick Wolf shows at this point between us. But it's funny that I just, throughout all these years, I always thought I'm moving out to California someday. And for better, for worse, I've just always had some other direction to go, some other place where it was like, well, I could go to LA, but there's an agent in New York who's interested in me. So it was like, well, I'm going to New York then.
Yeah, it is. You have to be, like a lot of things in life, it's surfing. Like you just have to follow the wave, and you can make adjustments, but you really have to learn to go with stuff.
Absolutely.
You really have to learn how to adapt constantly.
Yeah. And you're always keeping your eye out for the next wave. And if you don't want to take it, you better have a good reason.
Right.
You're not doing it.
Praying to God there is a next. There's another one.
That's right. Whenever I was doing theater, at every single show, at the very final curtain call, I'd take my bow, and when my head was towards the ground, I'd go, and now I'm unemployed.
Yep.
Like, there it was right there. Don't know what I'm doing next.
Yeah, I know that feeling too.
But funnily enough, I mean, directly when I was coming out of graduate school, and I was trying to decide if I go to LA or I go to New York. And I'd had some interest from an agent in New York, and I was talking it over with this guy who was acting in a show that was at that theater. I wasn't in the show with him. And this dude's name was Al White. Great dude. And he was like, your brother, he's always going to be out in California. You gotta go where the interest is. So go to New York. I was like, solid advice. So I took it. But Al White is he's had a long career, but he is probably best known as one of the jive talking dudes in Airplane.
Hilarious.
So like he steered, he was just one of those guys that had that conversation at a bar at one night, and he steered kind of like my whole career path. He was like, go to New York. And years later, I actually met him again and caught up with him, and super, super nice guy, super funny dude. But I had to thank him. I was like, you're right, man. You're right. Since I have been on that track, I didn't stop working. So,
it's funny. Did he remember telling you that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I saw him again. It was a couple years later, and, I reminded him who I was and stuff. And he remembered having the conversation. And then we just talked about boxing, and he was the first dude to tell me about Bass Reeves. Al White, big horseman. He's like a cowboy. That guy, straight to it. You would never think that the guy who's speaking jive.
Right. I remember, God, this is like 1990 or 91, walking around Tempe, Arizona. I'm down there doing the Tempe Improv, listening to Fresh Air with Terry Gross.
Terry Gross, sure.
And she's interviewing T-Bone Burnett, the musician. Right. And she's saying, now, T-Bone, you have an album out. Your wife, Sam Phillips, has an album out right now. You produced Elvis Costello, and he has an album out. Your wife's album is a big hit. Elvis' album's and do you feel like, oh, my album should sell more than? And he said, no, I try not to live competitively. And that really resonated with me. I was like, that is like a get out of psychological jail free card.
Oh yeah.
Like, you're doing what you're doing. I'm doing what I'm doing. And it really, you always have to remind yourself. But, to not get into that psychotic headspace, because it's just
to some degree, you got to take responsibility for your own happiness, especially in show business where other people are doing exciting things. But you just everybody has their moment or their wave. If you're lucky, you see it coming and are able to hit it.
So years later, I'm at a party and I meet T-Bone Burnett.
Nice.
And I tell him that. And he goes, did I say that? That's funny. And he literally goes, I guess that's just one of these things you say, and then it just goes out there and does what it does.
That doesn't sound like me.
Just like, no, it's like the old joke about the guy goes to Tibet and he climbs the top of this mountain to meet the master to find the meaning of life, and he sees the meaning of the master sitting on this little tree stump, and this little frail old man in that robe, and he goes up to him and he goes, Master, I've come here for the meaning of life, and the meaning, and he goes, you have to pet every dog. And he goes, that's it? I come all the way here? I come up this mountain, and you tell me the meaning of life is to pet every dog? And the master goes, it's not.
I think it is, being a dog owner. I think it is, actually.
Yeah, you just pet every dog. So what brought about the head, the tail, the whole damn thing? And who came up with the idea to do 2 movies at once? Because what I think that you guys are going to encounter as it develops is I immediately started thinking of combinations of movies.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this one and this one. Oh, this one and this one. Oh, this one and this one.
Yeah.
How did you, who came up with the idea for the podcast?
I think not only are we brothers, we're kind of also best friends, right? And we talk to each other on the phone a lot. So I'll be driving, because I have a long drive to get to work in the morning. It's about an hour and a half. And a lot of times I'll call him.
Where do you live?
Because I live in Agua Dulce.
Where the fuck is that?
Vasquez Rocks.
You're coming north.
Yeah, I'm coming from there down into Van Nuys.
I had no idea.
Yeah, I'm driving from where Kirk fought the Gorn every day. It's a long drive every day, and I would call him a couple of times a week, and we share a lot of common interests besides movies and horror and books and stuff like that. But it would always be like, what are you reading right now? What are you watching right now? And we play a lot of role play games. So we talk about like Dungeons and Dragons or something like that. And, campaigns he's running, campaigns I'm running, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And it was a few months back, I started to say to him, you know what? All these phone calls, they're so much fun. People would love this. Like, this is a podcast. And every day we were talking about this, everything that we're talking, this is a podcast. This is a podcast. So I just started thinking about it and thought, we should do a movie review podcast. I started listening to some horror movie review podcasts and I thought, fuck, we can do way better than this.
Yeah, that's nothing against anybody, but that's true. There's so many of them, and all of these people have good hearts.
Yeah.
And they love their families. But boy, oh boy, the thing that I noticed when I listened to it right away, as somebody that has been doing one for a long time, you guys hit the ground running. Like, you have a great rapport. You're both really funny. I wouldn't plug it if I didn't think it was worth listening to. I wouldn't do that. This sounds like your 100th episode, not your first episode.
Wow.
You guys clearly have been talking back and forth. And there's a way to do it. There's a rapport that you can't fake. Pod Save America is a great example of those three guys. They are been friends forever. They can finish each other's sentences, and you can hear it. And there's no way to fake that stuff. Blank Check with Griffin and David, same thing. And you guys got that right out of the gate. You do two movies, like the original idea is like a modern movie and then an older movie that's related to it. Where did that come from?
That was your idea, brother.
I think was just trying to figure out an angle. I mean, I appreciate you saying that about the rapport, and it's true. One thing about Mike and I, it's, when we're having these conversations when he's driving, or we play a lot of video games late at night, after the kids in bed and everything. And so often our conversations, I mean, we're laughing all the time, but then so often our conversation, like probably once a month, I'll laugh until I start crying or my sides hurt. You know what I mean? Like we're that kind of friend to each other, and we're on such the same wavelength. So I knew coming into it that we would have that with each other. It's just been, and I think the first few episodes that we've dropped already, I mean, I do think it's gotten better each time. It's just trying to find like, well, what's the angle for this, for the rapport that we have? How are we going to steer this ship necessarily? So came up with the idea of doing two, because we're trying to stay current, with the new release horror movies that are coming out. We want, that to be a hook to bring people in. But then as fans, we do want to go back and revisit Alien, and we do want to, visit Carrie and those old classics. Just because they're fun to watch again. They're fun to look at through this sort of new lens. And there's just so much material to talk about. Too much. In fact, I think our podcast could be 4 hours long, if we let it, but we have to rein ourselves in.
We do have to kind of edit down a little bit, because it seems like every episode is starting to get a little bit longer. It's this one's 4 minutes longer. Oh, this one's 8 minutes longer than the last one. Oh, like the one I was editing yesterday, it was like almost 2 hours. I was like, oh man, what the fuck?
And do you edit in GarageBand? Or do you have a different platform? Yeah.
Although we just started using a platform called Riverside.fm. We've recorded one episode on it, and it seems pretty fucking cool so far. And it also shoots video. So we're going to eventually graduate to video. At the moment, we want to keep it audio because we're having a good time doing dumb things like making mock trailers and stuff like that.
And I like to use a highfalutin term, the theater of the mind aspect of it.
Sure.
Like, no, this is just, you're just going to, like, last night I was driving home from the woefully unorganized Dark Harbor Queen Mary haunted house maze. And we met a bunch of people there, but I was driving with my wife and her cousin, and it took so long they immediately fell asleep in the car. It was like 1:30 in the morning.
That's a long drive.
Yeah, it was a 55-minute drive at 1:30 in the morning back to my house. So they were asleep. So I was like, oh, I can actually listen to what I want to listen to. And I put on old episodes of Dragnet, the radio show. Oh. Because if I'm tired, I don't want to hear music. I want to hear something spoken word that will involve me.
Something engaging. Yeah.
I was this is crazy. I was just listening to an old episode of Dragnet radio show maybe 2 weeks ago.
Those things are, as a writer, I'm enamored of those because there's no fat. They move like a freight train. And Jack Webb, just like I have a weird fascination with Mr. Webb. We have his bar set.
Really?
Right in the other room. I was on the road and I read that there was a Jack Webb estate sale. And
no way.
I told my wife, I was in Denver, but I was like, you got to go to this thing. So she went, and she goes, there was a line around the block, but I saw two cops walking in, and I just walked in behind them like I was with them. And went right to she's pretty savvy, and went right to the bar and bought this great old crystal whiskey decanters and glasses, these big chunky glasses. And sometimes I'll see one in the dishwasher. I'm like, do not use Jack Webb's glasses. I told you.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really funny. So what is if people tune in to the podcast, what is the first episode they're going to hear? What your first episode was?
The first episode was Friday the 13th, Part 6, and we matched it up with In a Violent Nature, which is that brand new slasher movie that is sort of like a love letter to Friday the 13th movies and Crystal Lake. And
it's a perfect combination. If you haven't seen In a Violent Nature, it's basically Friday the 13th from Jason's point of view.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is
it's like the camera is behind him the entire time as he slowly walks from kill to kill.
Right. And you guys, I learned a lot about the movie that I didn't know from listening to the podcast. One, I really loved In a Violent Nature. I thought it was great. And I really the actor left, like they lost the lead actor like more than halfway through the film and had to redo everything because even though he doesn't have a lot of dialogue, he's like the physicality of that character was. They couldn't recreate it with this other guy, so we just didn't do it again. Yeah. They ended up shooting 70% of the movie over. And that's insane on like a small budget film. That's insane, but yet they pull it off, you know? I thought that one of the good things I like about our version of a horror movie podcast is because we're both industry professionals. You know, he's got the actor mind and I have the makeup effects mind. We add sort of our own insight of like behind the scenes stuff. So I'm glad that you said that you learned some stuff about that movie, because that's kind of what we're also trying to do is give people little tidbits of things you're not going to get somewhere else, you know? With that in mind, because slasher movies, I'm more into story and I like the supernatural elements. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until I realized that, as you said, and I actually got it from my daughter. My daughter went to college and became a horror movie fan. She was never one living with me, oddly, but then she went to college and she came home and she came over for Thanksgiving and we went to see Thanksgiving. Yes. And she said, when we left, she went, all right, what were your favorite kills? And that was the very first time I realized that it's a sport almost. It's like, how can we cleverly create? It's like a comedy movie. It's the same language, the gag, setup, punchline, you know, it's absolutely. And there's a cleverness to the how you kill people. Yeah. And that's the sport of the movie. Tell us for a moment, for people who will listen, the kind of level of expertise they're going to get. Tell us about The Death of Yoga Girl.
Oh, man.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that Yoga Girl's the thing that everybody talks about when they see that movie, because it's so over the top, it's so well done. And I reached out to a friend of mine too, a Canadian makeup artist named Patrick Baxter, because I saw his name in the trailer or in the credits, and I was like, "Hey, you worked on this movie. I'm about to do a podcast about it." He goes, "Yeah, I only did like some reshoots. I did like Yoga Girl," and I was like, "Oh my god, are you fucking kidding me?"
Yeah, that's like somebody, for people who haven't seen the movie, it's like somebody on Alien going, "Well, I just did the chest burster. I don't know really everything."
Exactly.
Well, no, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. And because you guys are you guys, you can pick up the phone and talk to the guy that did it, and that's the great thing. It's not like
Yeah. So I reached out to him and he explained some of the stuff. And so I broke it down in the podcast. It was like, okay, you can see that this is a fake body that the arm goes through for the classic Jason punch through the body moment. And then she's wearing a big makeup appliance on her stomach with the hook sticking through it. And that's a whole thing. And then, he spins her around, and then it goes to a makeup appliance on the head with the hook in the head. And then we're cutting to a fake body and just kind of break it all down to, like, once you get to the fake body, that the head is being cranked around underneath, and you see the spine cranking, pushing up through the skin, and that was the thing that you picked up on, brother, is the grossest thing was
that's the part that got to me. Everything else I could deal with. It was the spine popping under the skin.
Well, yeah, again, it's the sound. It's the sound.
Totally. And then pulling that head through. And I think if you look at it when the head comes through, it's actually at the wrong angle. Like, it would have been upside down.
It's like they didn't even try.
Yeah.
My God.
Yeah.
Come on, you guys. What the hell?
My oldest daughter had a film class in high school, and she had to watch all of these movies, and she's a scientist. Mm-hmm. She's a paleontologist, but she's so funny. And her review of The Godfather was, they could have told that story in a half an hour. And I was like, well, yeah, sure. We watched Jaws. She'd never seen Jaws. And the first time, she's a modern kid. She's born in 2002. The first time the shark pops up out of the water, she goes, "That is so fake."
Oh, yeah.
But by the end of the movie, she was like, "Stab it in the eye, stab it in the eye." Like, she was all in. And that's, that's the kind of, like what you were talking about. It's the viscera that CG can't recreate.
Absolutely.
And a lot of that is a lot of that is sound,
Now wait, Dana, as like a monster nerd and a horror fan, how did your daughter get to be so old before she'd seen Jaws? Did you not try and get your kids to watch these movies as they were growing up, or what?
No, they just, we had shown Jaws, like my wife, for my birthday one year, we showed it in the backyard. Like, we had a projector and stuff, and we had a party and we showed it, and they just kind of wander in and out, It's like they were really into Twilight. So I just kind of encouraged them to like what they like. And I forced, obviously they had to watch Planet of the Apes.
Sure.
And,
it goes without saying, really.
Yeah. And I had an idea, and it's one of those things I never did. Like, I took them to see Rise of the Planet of the Apes when it was at the drive-in, because I saw the originals at the drive-in. They were big drive-in movies, and we went to see it at the drive-in, and they were, 10 and 12 or whatever they were. They were little. And then the next day, I was like, "This is the first movie that started this whole thing." And they're watching it, kind of like grudgingly. But when the ship is sinking in the lake, my daughter goes, "Dad, their clothes are in there." And I thought, what a great thing to do audio commentary with children, like a 10, 11-year-olds watching Jaws and just that would be great.
So my daughter is 12, and I'm very lucky that she actually has the attention. She's seen Jaws, and we watched Poltergeist and The Sixth Sense. like watching that movie with somebody who doesn't know what's going to happen is great. But we watched the original Terminator the other day. And Terminator, the beginning, they travel through time and they come back and they're naked, right? Yeah. Arnold goes and beats up the guys in the pool hall or whatever, and he beats up Bill Paxton and the rest of those guys, right? Yeah. Nice night for a walk, huh, buddy? But then Michael Baine's character finds like a homeless guy in the alley, and he just tears the guy's pants off and puts him on, and he runs like from the cops into the mall or whatever. And my daughter was like, "Ew!" Like he just put that homeless dude's pants on. And then the next scene, he's like getting a new pair of Nikes, product placement, new pair of Nikes and a duster coat or whatever. And she's like, "Get some new pants, get some new pants." He didn't get new pants. And the whole movie, she would just, every time that character came back, she'd be like, "Homeless dude's pants, homeless dude's pants." Later on, they go to a motel. They shower up. He has sex with Sarah Connor. And then the next scene, she's like, "Homeless dude's pants." He's still got the homeless dude's pants on. And I was like, yeah, this is the hot take on the Terminator I never expected. It's all about a homeless dude's pants.
Homeless dude's pants. It's so funny. I was thinking I was like, why didn't they see Jaws? Why didn't I make them see Jaws? And because we go to the beach, we live in California, we go to the beach, we go to Hawaii every summer. I didn't want them to have that thought in their head when they went in the water. Because anybody who sees Jaws, they go in the water and they think, And they didn't have it. They just blissfully enjoyed the ocean. So I'm like, you can watch Jaws later. For now, you can just enjoy the ocean.
My dad took me to see Jaws when it first came out, and he had already seen it. So when Ben Gardner's head pops down in the boat, that's like my dad grabbing my leg, like, And we lived on a lake. We lived on Walled Lake in Michigan. And he was convincing me about the freshwater sharks and that I have to be careful when going in the lake. And then I would be swimming and then he would swim underneath me and pull my leg underneath the water.
Oh my God. Terrible human being.
Fantastic. That's why I am who I am today.
What was the movie? It just came out last year and there's a great, it's really, I can't remember that. I think it was the prequel. Was it X? You see the girl in the lake and it's a drone shot and you see the alligator behind her.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's X, I think.
Is it?
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
And then the alligator comes back later.
Mm-hmm.
That was really great. That was very clever. And I liked they put it in there and then they brought it back later. Was it Chekhov's gun? Is that what it is?
It's the Chekhovian alligator.
The Chekhovian alligator.
Yeah, the alligator. I think alligator.
If an alligator attacks you in the first act, it might have been Pearl. It might have been.
Well, Pearl. She feeds the alligator, but I don't know that it's.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure somebody goes for a dip in X, and you see.
Yeah, it is an X. Yeah, it is an X, and then someone's thrown in later. It's really clever. The Chekhovian alligator. If an alligator appears in the drawing room in the first act, the alligator has to come back.
Our second episode was Maxine, which is the third in that movie, and Carrie, because we thought it was a good coming of age female, horror movie.
Right.
Twinning.
Your first episode is Friday the 13th, part 6.
Yeah.
And In a Violent Nature.
Yeah.
Yep.
Why Friday the 13th, part 6?
Part 6 is where that franchise really starts winking at the camera and knows what it is. They break the fourth wall a couple of times. It's all about Jason, and it's where that series really sort of found its legs. If you go back,
that's the one with Ron Palillo, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Horseshack.
I gotcha.
And it's the more famous version of Jason that everyone's more interested in. He's back from the dead zombie and he's just killing people indiscriminately. And that's what the In a Violent Nature is too. It's sort of a back from the dead zombie kind of, killer like Jason. So we thought they just really went well together because Another thing, too, that we've realized is if you do an old movie that's not necessarily a great movie, but is a fun movie, we can have a lot more fun talking about it.
And that is the thing that you bring up on the show, which is so important, that this movie isn't a great movie, but it's a great movie.
Oh, yeah. It's not a good film at all.
Yeah, but it's thoroughly entertaining. I love the original King Kong versus Godzilla.
Sure.
It's a terrible movie.
Yeah.
It's a god-awful movie, but I love every minute of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Largely, speaking of audio stuff, the sound of the slime when he's fighting the octopus is it's so great.
It doesn't doesn't King Kong versus the original one doesn't have two different endings depending on where
that's a rumor. It was always the one ending, but that was a rumor, yeah. But there's one of those things in it where in the American version, I know, because there's a Japanese version, American version, which is the one that has a lot of Americans in it. At one point, they're talking, and I don't know why they do this, goes, Godzilla is a reptile and electricity can destroy it. Kong is a mammal and electricity makes him stronger. What? That's why at the end Kong gets struck by lightning and he becomes stronger. It's like, don't try this at home.
It's just science, Dana. It's just science.
We're just going to make up our own science for this
Perhaps
one.
you didn't know.
Yeah, it's like Jaws and the Revenge. Sharks hold grudges like no one's business.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. Boy, I remember being a kid and seeing the trailer for Jaws 4, and the tagline on that one was, "This time it's personal." And when they said that in the trailer, the whole movie theater just erupted into laughter. It was just so ridiculous as a concept. And
I remember Tom Kenny, who is now famous as the voice of SpongeBob, but we started out together doing stand-up, and he used to do a joke in his stand-up act about that. He goes, just imagine a shark coming up on a beach with a rolling pin. Has anyone seen Roy Scheider? Has anyone seen Roy Scheider? Yeah, I remember seeing the trailer for Rocky 3, and the audience burst out laughing because there was another Rocky. Like, it just seemed so preposterous. Like, oh, come on, leave it. Now we're like Rocky 12 or something. But at the time, I was like, he's making a third Rocky. Let it go, buddy.
Yeah. Isn't that the joke in Airplane? Isn't there like a movie poster? It's like Rocky 48 or something.
It's like Rocky 4,000.
But also the other thing about Rocky 3, again, you have to remember it's 1982.
Yeah. Good year.
It's an amazing year for film, but it's a different time in our country.
Yes.
And the real premise of Rocky 3, and this is very evidenced in the trailer, is we found the scariest black man we could find. He's coming for your daughters.
And in reality, Mr. T is like the nicest guy you could ever meet.
I never met him. I heard he was bananas.
Super sweet dude, though, as far as, from what I've heard,
He said when he was on The Simpsons, he said, Clubber Lang threw that fight. He threw that fight intentionally because his mother needed an operation. was that in the script? And he just went, scenes you don't see.
That's awesome.
I think, I don't think Mr. T was the original. I mean, who did they approach for that first? It was like, I don't think it was Ken Norton, but they did
really?
juggle
like a
couple
boxer?
of people around. Yeah, like Larry Holmes or Ken Norton or something like that. And then but when they landed on Mr. T, 82, Mr. T's having some good years around that.
Oh, sure.
A few years. He's just about to get his own cereal here.
Do you find that you are flooded with pairings of movies? Like, oh, I got to do this. Oh, we have to do this. Oh, we have to do this. Oh, we have to do this.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Honestly, the challenge is that we want to keep it current. So we want to pick something that, a newer movie.
Right.
So it is difficult sometimes to think like, what are we going to pair with this? How are these things going to connect? I mean, we could take movies that have been around for a couple of years and do a double feature, like no problem, for years.
Right.
I think for me, at least, the challenge has been like, oh, what are we going to pair with Oddity, which is one of the newer ones we're looking at?
Right.
Yeah. And we decided Leprechaun.
Yeah, like what do you pair with Skinamarink? I guess Eraserhead.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's gonna have to be something weird, art house style.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I hope as a listener you don't tie yourself too strongly to that, because I keep thinking of like Ken Daly, the great Ken Daly, pointed this out to me last night. Aliens is a remake of Them.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, God damn it, you're right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that would be a great pairing.
We're absolutely going to move into that avenue of like classic versus classic and things that just pair well together. And you know, we want to have you on the show at some point too, and then you would choose the movies and then we just roll with it.
Yeah, that'll be easy.
Mm-hmm.
If there's one thing I'm good at, it's watching TV.
You're gonna bring a little Carnival of Souls into the equation here.
Well, yeah. Well, the obvious pairing of that is Final Destination.
Final Destination.
They're all remakes of Carnival of Souls.
Yeah. And there is actually a new Final Destination movie coming out.
Yeah, and there's something beautiful about those movies, and it's just pure clever kills.
Yeah.
It's like,
sure.
Here's a clever kill. Here's a clever kill. Here's a clever kill. Here's a clever kill.
Yeah, I worked on the fourth one. It was a lot of fun. We shot it all down in New Orleans. That's the one that opens with the racetrack with the car. You know, the cars on the racetrack and the accident.
Right.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, I mean, the greatest double bill that is Ed Wood and then Plan 9.
Oh hell yeah!
Especially for people that haven't. There's a lot of people that have seen Ed Wood but have not seen Plan 9, and then they see Plan 9 and they go like, "Oh my god,
you're right.
This is great." Yeah, and the other crazy thing about that is Glenn or Glenda.
Oh yeah.
How time has caught up with Glenn or Glenda. Glenn or Glenda's not funny anymore.
It's not. I guess you're right.
Yeah, and you. I mean, sure, he looks goofy, but keep it to yourself, pal.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's also, and this is 1952 or 54. I think it might be 54. It is a plea for tolerance that is decades ahead of its time.
Sure.
Guy in the early 50s going, yeah, I like to wear a dress. What's wrong with it?
Yeah.
And it took 70 years for culture to catch up with that.
Yeah.
Wow.
To at least be willing to have the conversation about it. Right?
Yeah.
Like humane adults.
Yeah.
Yeah.
James, do you have a favorite horror movie or like your top 3?
Are you going to consider Jaws a horror movie?
Yeah,
I mean, that's
sure.
it's my favorite movie.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Probably. It's probably number one. I'm actually looking at the bust of Robert Shaw as Quint that I have in my basement right now.
Mm-hmm.
Angle your thing. Can we see it?
Let me see if I can get it over there.
That's a nice basement
there.
Oh yeah, that's a good basement.
Well, thank you very much. I spent a lot of time here since COVID.
I hear you. Jaws is down in the basement.
Jaws is probably number one, although I love The Thing, of course.
Yep.
And then recent horror movies, if I'm looking at it, the one that, I will say this, the one that surprised me the most, the one I didn't see coming that I loved was Dr. Sleep. I thought Dr. Sleep was amazing, and they did something in Dr. Sleep that you so rarely see in horror movies. Like normally in the horror movie, the antagonist is just out to get him the whole time because they want to kill him. They're bloodthirsty, whatever the reason is. What I love about Dr. Sleep is that it switches a little over halfway through the movie, it switches and the bad guys want to kill them because the bad guys are afraid of them.
Right.
So it's fear that's motivating the bad guys. And I so rarely see that in horror movies.
Yeah.
That it blew me away. And so that one's really high on my list of recent ones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think obviously, the original Alien is going to be one of my favorite horror movies because that thing is just a masterpiece. You know, I mean, you can't really do any better with sci-fi horror than Alien, except for The Thing, which, you know, I saw in the theater when I was a kid, and I would say probably changed my life.
Not only was it a bomb, people hated it, and it destroyed Carpenter's career for a long time. It knocked him right out of the running. He was the hot young gun, and it was like, nope. And it was because 2 weeks before The Thing came out,
E.T.
came out.
Yeah.
And E.T. is an 80s movie.
Mm-hmm.
The Thing is a 70s movie.
Ah, yeah, you're right.
It's nihilistic.
It really is.
It's cynical. It's nihilistic.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah, you're right.
The E.T. it's morning in America. It's Reagan's America, everybody. Everything's great.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it was definitely and it's interesting how the shelf life of The Thing is so much more salient than the shelf life of E.T. E.T. is very much a museum piece.
It is.
And The Thing could have been made. The Thing is still completely.
I don't
current.
know. I don't know about that. I mean, I like The Thing way more than I like E.T., but I just showed E.T. to my kid recently. It's still a very effective movie. I mean, it still works on all points.
But I don't think people talk about it the way they talk about The Thing. I don't think it's still not. You know, I don't think it has the timelessness of the Thing. And I also just think that because of the nature of that it's shot in an army base in the nowhere, it could have been made yesterday. And The Thing is very much, and E.T. is very much, this was America in 1982.
Sure. It certainly has a timestamp.
It's dated. Planet of the Apes, oddly, is not, the only things that date the original apes is Lucius, the hippie ape. and the attitude towards women, which is pretty archaic. When he goes, Stuart was the most precious cargo we brought along. She was to be the new Eve. Like, really? Did she know that?
Yeah.
I bet she thought she was the botanist.
Yeah. Dames, am I right?
Yeah. Well, let's crack the seal on Operation New Eve and see what's going on. That'll give me a good opportunity to murder Dodge.
Oh, shit.
So, yeah, do you like The Thing more than Alien?
You know, I might say yes, but I also said when we reviewed Alien and Alien Romulus in our third episode, I brought up the fact that I love Alien so much I would live in that universe. And my kid was a little shocked. He was like, "What the fuck is wrong with you?" And I'm like, "I just think it's so cool." You know, the whole like I consider Outland to be in that universe as well.
It is.
Just gonna say that too. Yeah. Because I watched the trailer for Outland last night, and I was like, "Oh, space truckers again."
Yeah, it's fucking. That's Weyland Yutani right out of the gate.
Yeah,
and Outland is a remake of High Noon, basically.
Yeah, totally. It's a great Western in space. I always wanted to remake Big Jake as a Western in space. Like I thought that would be cool.
Yep.
Right. That's another podcast. Alien is fantastic. And The Thing had a bigger effect on me, I think, because of the makeup effects.
Which to this day are mind-numbing.
Absolutely. You know, you're not going to find stuff that's better. I mean, they did some crazy things with like pumping acetone into the skin so it swells and bursts and you know, things that you don't necessarily do today on stuff.
And Rob Bottin was 22.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
A genius.
So what are some of the combos that you have coming up, and then tell people where they can go to hear your podcast, The Head, the Tail, the Whole Damn Thing?
Go ahead, brother. Give them a shout.
We're about to drop Alien and Alien Romulus.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, we're following it up with Halloween 3, Season of the Witch.
Yes.
And
underrated movie, crippled by its title.
Yeah.
And Late Night with the Devil is what we've
Great
with
combo.
that one.
Both of those movies end with the protagonist saying, "Turn it off."
Yep.
After that, we've got, it looks like Oddity is the next the docket, and we're probably going to pair that one with Leprechaun.
Yeah, we have a Discord channel. If you join at our Patreon level, even at $0, you get access to the Discord channel where you can sort of chat with us and suggest things. And we put a vote up. It was like Leprechaun 1, 2, 3, 4, or The Wicker Man with Oddity, and everyone's seems to be voting for the original Leprechaun. So,
the original Wicker Man or the Nicolas Cage? Not the bees.
We had them both on there.
Yeah.
The original Wicker Man is terrifying. Just that last shot where he just like, fuck.
Yeah.
Boy, it takes a while
brutal.
to get to that last shot.
Oh, no, it takes a but it's just like at the end, like, oh. And Christopher Lee basically playing Hugh Hefner.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, just like.
But we realized, we touched on it, we realized, like, after reviewing some of the classic ones like Carrie and Alien, which are so good, we were like, boy, we need to have something in here that's like a little dumber.
Yeah.
And more fun to talk about. Because our reviews of Carrie and Alien were so glowing. Like, these movies do everything great. That we were like, we need to pepper it in there with some that are kind of delicious turkeys,
Yeah. We just did Manhunter and Longlegs as well.
Oh, that's right.
That's a good combo.
Yeah.
That's a great combo. I'm trying to think of what the non-obvious pairing to Godzilla -1 would be.
Ooh.
What is the non-obvious pairing? Yeah. The Host.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. I like to also try and pick movies that maybe people have not heard of or don't really know that much about.
Yeah.
It's like, I think The Host is a great underrated monster movie.
It's brilliant. Mm-hmm. It's brilliant.
Totally.
Have you ever seen, I believe it's Korean, Infection?
No.
Check that out. I'll send you the link. Brilliant twist at the end. Twist at the end.
Good. There's a lot of great Korean horror films and a lot of,
A Tale of Two Sisters is great.
I love A Tale of Two Sisters. Absolutely.
Not to be confused with The Tale of Two Sisters on Brazzers.
Which I don't know what you're talking about.
It's also
what is that? I don't know.
Also an excellent film.
Yeah, I don't get that reference at all. What is that?
What is that? Have you ever seen Inside? Which is another good Brazzers movie.
No.
I don't know why I'm laughing. I don't get it.
No one believes you, James.
Yeah. Inside is a French horror film about a pregnant woman on Christmas Eve, and she's being stalked by somebody that wants her baby.
Oh.
And it's a fantastic sort of slasher movie.
Inside. Who made what? Is that Korean or is it?
It's French.
I'm writing that down. It's a great idea.
Yeah. When you look at the cover, though, you're going to be like, that looks stupid. Because it's like, I want to say it's like a pair of scissors and a pregnant belly. And you're like, ew, I don't think I want to see that.
It's actually, it's like a pro-choice. It's like a Planned Parenthood mailing. Oh, that's a great idea, though. Because that would go to Rosemary's Baby almost, too. Or Demon Seed.
Ooh,
Demon Seed.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well,
I think we want to pair the first Omen, the new one, with the original Omen.
I heard the original Omen is great.
Yes, obviously.
I haven't seen the first Omen.
You should see it. You should see it if you're a fan of the original Omen because it ties in perfectly.
Okay, that's great.
I think they did a real good job also making it look like a 70s movie.
I used to do a bit in my act of Gregory Peck as Gregory Peck is wanting to be in Silence of the Lambs and insisting that he auditioned to play multiple Megs, which was the only role that had not been cast. Mr. Peck, Mr. Peck, you can't play this role because clearly people are going to, please, I've worked on it and I'd like to try. Sure. I can smell your cunt. Well, thank you, Mr. Please. Maybe it's this. I can smell your cunt. Okay, thank you, Mr. Peck. Please. I'll work scale. I love the script. I can smell your cunt. Thank you, Mr. Peck.
I fucking love that.
And on that note,
yeah.
Where can people find The Head, the Tail, the Whole Damn Thing?
Any place you download podcasts, Apple, Spotify, just look up The Head, the Tail, the Whole Damn Thing.
I got it on, is it Podreacher? Is that it? But also has a Podbean, which also carries a podcast I really like called Kill James Bond, which is a really great podcast.
Oh, that sounds cool.
Yeah.
Patreon, you can find us the Whole Damn Thing at Patreon. Our Instagram is the Whole Damn Thing 13 at Instagram.
The Whole Damn Thing 13.
Yeah.
At Instagram.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're doing a lot of stupid memes that go along with our stuff. That's something else that we're kind of trying to add to our shows, like recutting. Yeah, like for Alien, there's that famous meme you can find that is the box cover that is the Hong Kong bootleg DVD. And on the back of it, on the back of the Hong Kong bootleg DVD, it's terrible broken English summary of the movie. Yes. So we took the trailer and did it with narrator voice. Yeah. So it's narrator voice reading that over the original Alien trailer, which has no dialogue. It just has crazy chaotic music. So it actually works. Yeah. And my brother's working on a Folgers commercial for Manhunter. You know that scene in Manhunter where he's talking to his kid in the grocery store about like how he was in the asylum and, did you... how he had to get into the bad thoughts of the...
It's an amazing, intense scene. And Peterson is fantastic in it.
Absolutely.
Getting into the killer's thoughts, the worst thoughts you can think of, Kevin. And then in that scene, his kid's like, so what kind of coffee you like? Mom says you like Folgers.
Yeah.
And it just happens in the movie. You're like, what the fuck?
Yeah. So we're making a Folgers commercial for that. And we're trying to add a lot of fun stuff for the Patreon.
Oh, it's great.
People.
It's great. And it's worth it. My guests are Mike McCarty and James Knight, brothers, human brothers. And their podcast is The Head, the Tail, the Whole Damn Thing. Highly recommended. Thanks for coming
so
by.
much. Yeah. Thank you so much. This has been fun.
Thanks, Dana.
It's the Dana Gould Hour.
Trick or treat, trick or treat, trick or treat for Halloween. Better treat us right, or overnight your little white house turns green. Trick or treat, trick or treat.
Hello? Matt Bronger. Danish Ghoul. Hi, buddy. Sorry to bug you. Do you got a minute? Yeah, actually, you caught me at a perfect time. I was just power washing my giant skeleton in the front yard, and I just need to let it dry. Did you get one of the Home Depot 8-footers? I did. Here's my issue with the 8-footers. There was this race of 8-foot people that wasn't that interesting, but now that we have their skeletons, it's really cool. There's a scientific theory, this race of larger, more docile humanoids that we, the Homo sapiens, defeated. Big, nice guys like Steve Agee or me or, Pete Holmes have just immediately murdered. That's nothing if not on brand. Well, here's why I called to bother you. What's up? Quick series of questions. Oh, okay. What movie scared you as a kid? What was the first movie that you saw when you were a kid that frightened you? Doesn't have to be a horror movie. Shortest answer, E.T. when they find him in the bushes and he screams, that gave me nightmares.
How old were you when you saw E.T.?
I was probably, what year was that, 82?
82.
I was 7. For a movie to really answer your, like, as a whole, it'd be a tie between Burnt Offerings with Oliver Reed and Magic starring Anthony Hopkins. Those were the two ones that messed me up in a way that, like, frightened me, but also it made me go, I really love horror movies. I don't know what it is. I love them.
The TV commercial for the movie Magic was terrifying.
I think that came out late 70s.
Yeah,
so
it was 78, 79.
Yeah, so it was like we saw it when it came out on VHS. And the cover, I remember seeing the cover and seeing that goddamn doll. I remember being on the playground and I heard that movie's about the mythos that came out of that. You know, everybody had a different plot line for what that movie was based on. And when the kids finally rented it, it's like you find out it's just, the failed ventriloquist and the doll isn't even actually possessed. The guy is just kind of nuts, you know, like.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because the doll does look vaguely like Anthony Hopkins, but I don't know if that's something that we put on it later. Like, I don't know if that was intentional or if they already had the doll and then they cast Anthony Hopkins and
that's funny.
You project it.
Yeah.
However, the episode of The Twilight Zone where Cliff Robertson is the ventriloquist, whose dummy possesses him or vice versa, that dummy was made to look like Cliff Robertson, but it looks exactly like Matt Gates.
This one looks too evil. With his pinched little devilish face.
So you came of age, like you're seeing movies in the 90s. That's when you're like seeing first run.
Well, my dad tried to take me to Creature of the Black Lagoon at a repertory theater, and he came out and grabbed that lady's leg. I screeched, and my dad had to take me to the theater. I think I was really, really, really young, but.
I remember my youngest getting frightened at The Incredibles. It was The Incredibles or The Incredibles 2, where they were underwater and they found like something underwater, and she just went, "Daddy, I scared." And I turned around.
Oh yeah, gotta go.
Yeah.
My daughter was like that with the New York subway most recently. I was like, nope, this is not the vibe with those trains going by. And
no, I get it. Yeah. And when you take your daughter out of that situation, I don't know, if you're me, you think, this is a great example of where I'm doing a better job than my dad.
Yeah, no.
He would have immediately abandoned me there so I would face my fear and be a man at the age of 5.
Yes, sure, damn the trauma. That's fine.
Yeah. What is a big horror movie that you did see in the theater? Like early, not like last week.
Senior year of high school, we played hooky and went and saw Misery.
Perfect.
That was great because I've always been a big Stephen King fan. My parents let me read anything when I was a kid. You know, it's like their position as educators, for sure. My mom, and being an English teacher, was like, long as you're reading. Like, her whole thing was not only teaching kids to read, but teaching them to love to read so they never stop reading. I was reading The Exorcist and the Amityville Horror. Those were like my first adult books, Salem's Lot. And I remember going to see that movie and kind of being like, well, you know, I read the book. It's messed up. I remember the hobbling scene. No one else was in the theater. I think it'd been out a couple weeks. We all got up, 5 to 7 young men, and just ran around the theater screaming.
Yeah, that is
up and down the aisle. And it was like that. Looking back, that should have been allowed. Like, it's okay. Look, as long as you're in orderly fashion, don't run anyone over, but you can get up and shriek, run up and down the aisle. I remember it being so cathartic. It's like that first bonk. And you just run up and down the aisle. Yeah. Remind yourself that's not happening to anyone's leg that's real.
I remember, I guess this is almost a Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, which
terrifying.
Has many terrifying moments in it, and is about a horrifying topic.
Right.
But the thing that really weirded me out was when they lift up the corpse's fingernail.
Oh.
And it's a corpse. They're not feeling anything. And still, I was like, no.
Yeah. Yeah. There's certain things that, like, I have a friend who he's a huge horror fan, but if I see one before him, his only question is like, is there a compound fracture? I don't know. He's never had one, I don't think. But it's like we have those things. I realize I'm so much like that judge in the 70s talking about pornography. I know it when I see it.
I know when I see it.
Like, what do you like in a horror movie? I know it when I see it.
Yeah, I know when I see it, and I see it a lot.
You know, I know it when I find it in a pile of magazines in the woods, and I keep it. I give it to my friend.
Somebody told me that they found in the woods when they were a kid. We were talking about that thing. A box, and in the box was a bunch of porn magazines and 4 deer hooves.
Wow.
And like, I don't know what they were doing, but I have 37 ideas. Do you have what you would call a favorite horror movie, or one of? Like, yeah, everybody has 3 or 4 that are just like stellar.
I think my 2 favorites are your 2 favorites, American Werewolf in London and The Thing. Carpenter's The Thing. I remember having what I'd call a perfect afternoon on the road watching the director's cut of Midsommar. It's like 3 hours, and it felt like an hour and a half. I love Rosemary's Baby. You can't really beat Halloween for its simplistic dread of that feeling of Halloween.
It's John Carpenter's most successful movie, commercially.
Right.
And his simplest movie.
Yeah. He nailed the thing of right when all the trick-or-treaters go home and then the night is silent and Halloween is basically over, but it's not over. That's the scariest time in Halloween because it's kind of like the dread is there. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That's
have these sad decorations, and you go, oh wait. This was the holiday where the dead were allowed to roam the earth. I remember we watched Friday the 13th 4 or 5 or something when I was in 5th grade on VHS, and we were like, we got to see the whole movie before we trick or treat. And we went trick or treating. And we were alone on the streets, and I remember we hit maybe 5 or 6 houses, and we're like, I got to go home. This isn't fun. 9 p.m. What are you doing? You know, he nailed that window, and we hear that. You know, I don't even think of that the Halloween theme as much as that little sting, that like a little thing when it's just panning across this dark, empty neighborhood. It's like, oh man, like it's so well done.
Where we grew up was it looked like where the Peanuts lived, where I grew up. And my brothers and our friends, like, we had a pack of kids when we were in my block growing up. It's like 30 of us.
Right.
And we would all go trick-or-treating together. So one year we went into on foot, like into the other town, you know, and our parents weren't worried because we were all together and stuff, and somebody called. So we weren't worried that they were flipping out. But it was also, it went from Charlie Brown and the kids trick-or-treating, and then the way home was Snoopy by himself. It was just, the music became like that. Like, why are you kids out? It's 10 o'clock. Get home. It's too dark. All right, my friend. Hey, thanks for letting me call you. I know you get a busy day. I'll let you get back to
I appreciate it. Let me get back to washing that skeleton, especially its crotch. Thanks, Dana.
I'll see you later.
Night of the Blood Beast brings you the first creature on Earth bullets cannot kill.
If his head's gone.
A blood beast that feasts on Earth's scientists. The first satellite creature to impregnate man with its chromosomes.
It's true. I can feel it inside.
The first exploration into living space, exposing secrets too horrifying to reveal. You'll know days of nerve-straining suspense. It's first-degree terror when you see Night of the Blood Beast.
As the old saying goes, it all starts on the page. Dracula was first published in 1897. It was written by Bram Stoker. Stoker was, by day, the manager of London's Lyceum Theatre, but he wrote several books as well. Now, by his own admission, Bram Stoker wrote primarily to supplement his income, not to bare his soul or unveil any deep, hidden truths, but he was a pro. Dracula was his 7th published novel. He did his research. He'd famously collected tons of notes on Romanian history and the like. Now, people assume that he based the character of Dracula on the historical figures discovered in that research, people like Vlad Tepes or Vlad the Impaler and the Countess Bathory. But those names do not appear anywhere in Stoker's notes. However, as manager of the Lyceum Theatre, Stoker dealt extensively with an actor named Henry Irving. Now, he was a famous actor and a famously actory actor. Henry Irving was a mercurial, manipulative narcissist, and Stoker was somewhat obsessed with him. There are theories that Stoker's affection for Irving strayed to the romantic. Stoker did have a somewhat steamy correspondence with Walt Whitman. He was close with Oscar Wilde, and Dracula is a pretty sexually charged and sexually fluid story. Only Stoker knows for sure, and he's not talking. If this is the case, it would not be the first time a writer's weird boss became the subject of a famous fictional character. Gene Roddenberry was a speechwriter for Los Angeles Police Chief William H. Parker. Parker was famously lacking in emotion, a work-obsessed automaton of a man. Today, we would say he seemed on the spectrum. Anyway, when Roddenberry was putting together the TV pilot for Star Trek, he took the famously unemotional Parker and cast his personality onto the Enterprise as the logic-devoted First Officer Spock. So Dracula was published in 1897, and it was a critical and commercial smash. It was not the first vampire story ever written, but it was and remains the best to date. The first theatrical adaptation of Dracula was written by Stoker himself. It was performed only once, before the book was even published. As a stage adaptation, it wasn't really an adaptation at all. It was basically the book with stage directions. It was long, it was leaden, it was not good theater. But good theater for this production was not the point. The point was that, before the book was even published, the theatrical performance copyright had been established by Bram Stoker, and that was a smart move. Now, contrary to common assumption, the first Dracula movie was not Universal's 1931 film starring Bela Lugosi. It was, in fact, a 1921 Hungarian film by Károly László called Dracula Halala, translation, The Death of Dracula. The Death of Dracula didn't make a lot of noise, but the following year, German expressionist filmmaker F.W. Murnau made Nosferatu, a symphony of horror, a film version of Dracula. And that movie did make a lot of noise. Unfortunately, it brought them to the attention of the Bram Stoker estate. F.W. Murnau didn't get the rights from the Bram Stoker estate to make the movie. You know who didn't appreciate that? The Bram Stoker estate. Bram Stoker died in 1912, but his widow Florence was alive and well and had a lawyer. She sued Nosferatu's production company, the German studio Prana. The case was decided in 1924, and as part of the settlement, Prana agreed to destroy all copies of the film. What? Lucky for us, they did not. But lawsuits cost money, and money was what Florence Stoker needed. Enter a guy named Hamilton Dean. Dean was an Irish actor who knew Bram Stoker and Henry Irving from early in his career. But by the early 1920s, long after Stoker and Irving had both passed away, Dean formed his own theatrical company and wanted to do a genuine stage adaptation of Bram Stoker's book. He approached his widow, Florence Stoker. She needed the money because she was suing F.W. Murnau, so she agreed. Dean's play was a hit, and in 1927, it was brought over the Atlantic to premiere on Broadway. Writer John Balderston was hired to give Dean's play some American flair. Now, unlike Stoker's adaptation of his own book, Dean and Balderston telescope the story down, combining characters, eliminating locations, etc., etc. Stoker's book begins in Transylvania, and then there's a sea voyage to England on the cursed Demeter. Then there's a flood of rats, a trip to London, and eventually a journey back to Transylvania. Dean's play picks up the story after Dracula has arrived in England, and it stays there. The Broadway version of the play was a big hit too, the role of Dracula being played by a dashing young Hungarian actor hailed as the next Valentino, Bela Lugosi. Universal Studios bought the rights to the Dean Balderston play and the novel to ensure they held exclusive rights to the character of Dracula. Universal brought in a novelist named Louis Bromfeld to adapt John Balderston's revision of Hamilton Dean's adaptation of Bram Stoker's book. Bromfeld tried to combine the novel and the play, but his version didn't quite cut it. So Garrett Fort was brought in to rewrite Bromfield's version of John Balderston's revision of Hamilton Dean's adaptation of Bram Stoker's book. Bela Lugosi became a star with his Broadway turn as Dracula, so naturally for the film, Universal wanted Conrad Veidt, who had just done a pretty creepy turn for the studio in a film called The Man Who Laughs. However, this was right around the time that silent movies became talkies, and Veidt, worried about his thick German accent, left Hollywood to return to his native Germany to continue his career. That left the door open for Lon Chaney Sr. Now, this isn't very surprising. Lon Chaney Sr. was one of the biggest film stars in the country, and he was a close collaborator with the man slated to direct Dracula, Todd Browning. But then, as the film moved closer to production, Lon Chaney Sr. died. Now that's method acting. Anyway, Chaney's death finally left the door open for John Ray. And then 6 other actors were considered for the role. Lugosi, not one of them. But to his credit, he lobbied for it. He lobbied hard for it. Despite his success on Broadway, Universal did not consider him a film actor. But Lugosi was in Los Angeles at the time with the touring company of the show, and he won over the Universal brass executive by executive. Also, he agreed to an insultingly low salary, which Universal, in its own warped way, would hold against him for the rest of his life. The budget for the film was $355,000. Lugosi was paid a total of $3,500. In today's dollars, that amounts to a budget of about $6.5 million, with the star being paid $65,000. Crazy. The production of Dracula was covered on this podcast and the True Tales from Weirdsville story on its director, Todd Browning, from Season 3, Episode 2, entitled Heavy Duty. So you can check that episode out if you really want to go into the details. This story is going beyond that, but here are the big points. Todd Browning was a huge director who had made a series of phenomenally successful films with Lon Chaney Sr., no doubt shaken by the recent death of his friend and creative partner. Browning seemed oddly out of it during the production of Dracula, and this shows on screen. It has been recalled by several cast members that during large chunks of the production, Browning was so checked out that cinematographer Carl Freund did a lot of the actual directing uncredited. Now, the first 20 minutes of Dracula are great, and they lay out the entire visual language of Gothic horror movies for the remainder of the 20th century. But once the story leaves Transylvania and moves to England, it comes to a dead, leaden stop. The first act has Bela Lugosi's otherworldly and creepy performance and Dwight Frye's unmatched portrayal of Renfield. Then you get to England and meet David Manners and Helen Chandler playing Jonathan Harker and Mina in these heavily mannered, theatrically overacted performances. Things get pretty rough. Here, in my opinion, is the most interesting aspect of the story. Dracula was filmed in 1930, which, as we said, was the birth of the talkies. Now, one of the cool things about silent films was you could sell them to foreign countries without even blinking. All you had to do was change out the cards with the dialogue written on them to whatever language was spoken in that country. Not so with talkies. Film studios were still wrapping their heads around sound, much less dubbing dialogue into a foreign language. So what they did instead was they filmed a whole other version of Dracula at the same time. During the day, Todd Browning, or Karl Freund, depending on who you believe, would walk onto the Universal soundstage and film Dracula, starring Bela Lugosi. Then they would wrap around 5 or 6 p.m. And then a whole new Spanish-speaking cast and crew would walk onto the same sets, often using the same costumes. And George Melford would direct the Spanish-language version of Dracula, starring Carlos Villarreal. The Spanish-language version of Dracula was long thought to be lost, but a copy was found some years ago in Cuba, and it was rescued and restored. It's very interesting to watch both movies back to back. There's some really clever camera work in the Melford version that is missing in the Browning version, but only the Browning version has Bela Lugosi and Dwight Frye. Another aspect of just how early this film was regarding the advent of talkies, Dracula has no soundtrack. It has no score, because in these early days of sound, movies didn't have musical scores. It was felt that unless the band was actually on screen playing, the audience would not know where the music was coming from. For what it's worth, the lack of a musical score is what gives the early part of the movie part of its eerie, otherworldly punch. Now, years later, avant-garde composer Philip Glass composed a soundtrack for the film that was performed by the Kronos Quartet. You can obtain a version of Dracula with the Philip Glass score. And if you think it improves the movie, that makes one of us. There is some music under the titles in the original version, a selection from Swan Lake. Dracula was released on Valentine's Day, 1931, and it was a smash hit. With Lon Chaney dead and Dracula successful, Universal made amends to Lugosi by declaring him their new horror star, and immediately lined him up for the next big horror attraction, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. But as anyone who has seen Ed Wood will recall, Lugosi turned them down. Lugosi didn't want to be the next Lon Chaney. He wanted to be the next Valentino. The part of the Frankenstein monster eventually went to a British actor who had only been playing bit parts as gangsters and heavies. Frankenstein's director, James Whale, spotted him in the commissary eating lunch, thought he had an interesting face. This actor was, of course, Bill Pratt. Professional name, the much more colorful Boris Karloff. Frankenstein was also a huge hit, and it made a star of Boris Karloff. So Boris Karloff would become Universal's next Lon Chaney, something Boris Karloff didn't seem to mind nearly as much as Bela Lugosi. Fun fact, one of the first films Karloff made in the immediate wake of Frankenstein was The Mummy. The Mummy was written by John Balderston, the man who did the American polish on Hamilton Dean's play Dracula. The Mummy has basically the same plot as Dracula. It opens with the same selection from Swan Lake and is directed by Dracula's cinematographer and, by most accounts, sometime director, Karl Freund. Fun fact number 2. Later in his career, Karl Freund would be the cinematographer of I Love Lucy and worked with Desi Arnaz to invent the multi-camera method of filming sitcoms that we still use to this day. The character of Dracula would appear in several more films for Universal. There was a sequel right away, Dracula's Daughter, which is a really good movie, although Bela Lugosi's not in it. It starts with the Count being staked off screen, so we never get to see Dracula's daughter, ask her dad for money or a ride somewhere. Son of Dracula would star Lon Chaney Jr. He's wrong for the part. Chaney Jr. was a big, beefy guy, and he walks around Son of Dracula looking like a football coach dressed as Dracula for a party. In House of Frankenstein and House of Dracula, he's played by John Carradine. Carradine's a good actor, and he looks the part. He's the father of Kill Bill star David Carradine, if you didn't know. By now it was the mid-1940s, and more than a dozen years had passed since Todd Browning's original, and Bela Lugosi's star had faded. He never managed to tame his thick Hungarian accent and was now struggling with a drug addiction stemming from an injury he sustained in World War I. This is how shitty Universal Studios treated Bela Lugosi. Lugosi portrays Igor in 1939's Son of Frankenstein. Igor is the creepy, hunchbacked assistant, a variation on the role Dwight Fry played in the original Frankenstein. The film stars Boris Karloff and Basil Rathbone as the monster and Dr. Frankenstein, respectively. In 8 years, Lugosi had gone from playing Dracula to the hunchbacked sidekick. And Universal didn't want him for that. But the film's director, Roland Lee, insisted. So Universal said, fine, but we're not going to pay him. Desperate, Lugosi accepted. When Boris Karloff and Basil Rathbone found out how little Lugosi was being paid, they went to Universal and said, you either pay him what you're paying us, or we're not showing up for work. And Universal paid up. And it's a good thing, because Bela Lugosi steals that movie. He is hilarious in the part. Anyone who thinks Lugosi is a bad actor needs to watch The Son of Frankenstein. Lugosi played Count Dracula for only the second time on screen in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. He'd played other vampires, like in 1935's Mark of the Vampire, but that was not Dracula, as it was for MGM. It was now 1948, and Universal still didn't want him. But like he had done 17 years previously, in 1931, Lugosi and his agents lobbied hard and won him the part. And again, good thing, he's great to watch. But it was Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein which marked the end of Universal's horror cycle. Smash cut 9 years, and enter Hammer Films. Hammer was a British film studio founded in 1935. It did okay, making primarily comedies and potboilers. In 1955, they did a film adaptation of the BBC TV series The Quatermass Experiment. It was a huge hit, and the studio began looking for other films in that genre. In addition to Quatermass 2, a script for an adaptation of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein caught their attention. Now, the rights to Mary Shelley's book had been in the public domain for quite a while, but Universal still had the rights to their version of Frankenstein, including his iconic look, the flat head, the screws in the neck. The script that Hammer got was written by two Americans, Max Rosenberg and Milton Subotsky. But they felt it was a little too similar to Universal's Son of Frankenstein, so it was given to a British screenwriter, the great Jimmy Sangster, who turned out a lean, mean, stripped-down version of the Frankenstein story. Actor Peter Cushing plays Dr. Frankenstein, and Christopher Lee played the monster. The design of the monster's makeup was shocking, all the more so in that it was shot in bold, bright, highly saturated color. It also, most importantly, bore no resemblance to Karloff's. which added another layer of insulation against a Universal lawsuit. The film was a huge hit in Britain, but also in America, where, remember, this was 1957. The idea of a full-color Frankenstein was pretty exotic stuff. With Frankenstein a hit, the follow-up seemed obvious. Not messing with the formula of their previous success, Hammer reunited the old gang, writer Jimmy Sangster, director Terence Fisher, and actors Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, playing Van Helsing and Dracula, respectively. I don't know if Jimmy Sangster started with the book, the play, or the movie based on the play that was based on the book, but he did winnow down the story even more than Hamilton Dean and John Balderstone did. There's no Renfield traveling to Transylvania to sell Dracula Carfax Abbey. Jonathan Harker shows up to Dracula's castle in the city of Klausenburg, ostensibly to index the books in Dracula's library. But we soon learn that Harker knows already that Dracula is a vampire, and he has been sent there to kill him, with the full knowledge of his partner, Dr. Van Helsing. Things don't go according to plan for Jonathan Harker. The action eventually moves not to London, but to the nearby town of Ingolstadt. This, of course, was to save money. Hammer couldn't afford a simulated boat trip, but in doing so, it also cut a lot of shoe leather. Unlike Universal's 1931 Dracula, which feels plodding and stagey, a little mannered, Hammer's 1958 horror of Dracula hurtles along, slamming from scene into scene in bright, deep, oversaturated color. You can hear the difference in the films from their opening themes. Bela Lugosi's Dracula. And Christopher Lee's. Unlike Lugosi, Lee did not wear a tuxedo. He did wear fangs. His eyes turned red. He appeared with his mouth smeared with blood. He ran, he jumped, he fought. The same with Peter Cushing's Professor Van Helsing, who was much younger and more athletic than Edward Van Sloan's goofy, doddering Dutch physician. During the finale of Horror of Dracula, Cushing chases Lee through Dracula's castle in a breakneck fight with thrown furniture, snarling, kicking, grappling, gnashing fangs, bloodshot eyes, tossed candelabras. It's great! Dracula's inevitable death is not a tasteful staking done off screen. Van Helsing leaps off a table, yanks the curtains off a window, and traps Dracula in the deadly rays of the sun. Dracula's face dissolves and crumbles into dust before our very eyes. Horror of Dracula was a well-deserved critical and box office success and started an entirely new horror cycle that made Christopher Lee's Dracula one of the pop cultural icons of the 1960s. Like Universal's Dracula, the first sequel didn't have Dracula in it. 1960's Brides of Dracula doesn't star Christopher Lee, but it does star Peter Cushing as Van Helsing, going up against David Peel as the Baron Meinster. Brides of Dracula is fantastic. It is a terrific movie, gorgeous to watch, with Hammer's now trademark, bold, overly dramatic color palette. Blood everywhere, running, jumping, fighting, boobs. Did I mention boobs? Oh yeah, a lot of boobs. Brides of Dracula is one of the best vampire movies ever. Lee was back as Dracula in Dracula, Prince of Darkness, where he gives a riveting performance, despite the fact that he has no dialogue. That was followed by the superior Dracula Has Risen from the Grave, and then on to Taste the Blood of Dracula, Scars of Dracula, which, rumor has it, was just an early abandoned script from Dracula Has Risen from the Grave. And then the series came to a somewhat ignominious end with Dracula AD 1972 and its follow-up, The The Satanic Rites of Dracula. These last two films transport Dracula into the early 1970s in England, where he rubs elbows with swinging London. It's basically Dracula meets Austin Powers, but it's not nearly as much fun as it sounds. Now, if there was one thing Universal's Dracula and Hammer's Dracula have in common, it's they always get the same complaint. It's not like the book. Why isn't it more like the book? Well, in the early 1990s, writer James Hart wrote the movie Bram Stoker's Dracula, which claimed to be, praise God, faithful to the book. Oh, goody. Bram Stoker's Dracula was directed by Francis Ford Coppola and starred Gary Oldman, Winona Ryder, and Keanu Reeves. Now, I think this movie is really, really fun. It's big, it's campy, the sets are great, the in-camera effects are excellent, the costumes are jaw-dropping, it has Tom Waits as Renfield. The only problem with that is I want more of him. It made a ton of money, and Keanu Reeves survived getting dragged for his British accent. Dracula's main drive in the film is to capture the heart of Jonathan Harker's fiancée, Mina, who he believes is the reincarnation of his long-dead wife, Elisabetta. This makes Dracula more of a tragic romantic figure than Lee's feral predator. All well and good, but that's not the book. That storyline is Barnabas Collins' first storyline from Dark Shadows. But that's not even my point. My point is this. It's not like the book is a common complaint about movies that are adapted from novels. Usually, it's a good thing. Movies aren't books. They're totally different experiences. There's a lot of stuff in the novel Jaws that's not in the movie. And you know what? I don't miss it. No one does. In my opinion, the best movie adaptation of Dracula is Horror of Dracula. And it's the adaptation that's the least like the book. It starts with a bang and moves like a freight train till its blammo, pow, boffo climax. It's only 82 minutes long, for crying out loud. If Bram Stoker's motivation to write Dracula was to pen a money-making, blood and thunder Victorian novel, then Horror of Dracula is the closest cinematic equivalent to that. Again, my opinion. One last thing. If Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula really was so close to the book, why did they publish a novelization of it? That's right. There was a novelization of the movie based on the novel. In 1992, concurrent with the release of the film, Signet published Bram Stoker's Dracula, a Francis Ford Coppola film by Fred Saberhagen. So it was Fred Saberhagen's adaptation of James Hart's script for Francis Ford Coppola's version of Bram Stoker's Dracula, the novelization of the film that is more faithful to the source material but not as good as Jimmy Sangster's rewrite of Max Rosenberg and Milton Subotsky's take on Bram Stoker's novel, which may or may not have been influenced by Garrett Fort's rewrite of Louis Bromfeld's screenplay of John Balderston and Hamilton Dean's theatrical adaptation of Bram Stoker's book.
Listen to them. Children of the night. What music they make.
It is an historic occasion whenever Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi confront each other. Their very presence weaves a spell of mystery and horror. Ready for the test, Dracula? I'm ready, Frankenstein. Then let us begin. It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
When this dead hand moves, the monster created by a man they called Mad is turned loose to strike terror into the hearts of men. To shock women into uncontrolled hysteria. To prey upon the innocence of children. This is the story you've heard about, talked about. The spine-tingling, blood-chilling story that stuns your emotions. Frankenstein.
Hello? Hey, Aaron. Dana Gould.
Dana?
What's up?
I saw you on the caller ID, but I thought maybe it was your wife using the phone.
As is often the case. Wait, my wife calls you a lot on my phone.
Anyways, how are you?
Wait a minute. Do you got a minute?
For you, I have 10 minutes.
I always ask if it's a good time.
Especially, it's the best time. It's the spooky season, Halloween, and if I see you calling me, I'm like, fuck, I'm like breaking my ankle to get to the phone.
Well, there it is, and so that's the thing, I am calling you for a reason. I have the Halloween episode of the podcast. I want to check in with the people that I care about, and I have a couple of quick questions for you about your horror movie affection. I'll start off with this question. What was the last horror movie you saw?
Well, it was last night. I'm in Lexington, Kentucky, where my family is.
Okay.
And
not to brag.
well, Lexington's the cool part of Kentucky, Dan.
Okay.
And I went to their beautiful old movie palace here, the Kentucky Theater, which was the kind of theater I grew up with, and saw an amazing, perfect screening of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And
oh my God! Like at 35?
Well, no. Well, they do the kind. It's a digital projector, so
sure.
They do the whole kind of 4K thing. And I took my 16-year-old nephew who had never seen it, who really just hearing that I was going was like, I have to see that. I felt a little weird about.
Sure.
I was like, but I guess that's the uncle thing. Is your uncle corrupts you, right? Like your scumbag uncle takes you to Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So, and you know what's funny? The movie played well, but he was surprised. He was like, did you notice people were laughing during the movie? And I was kind of trying to explain to him, like, he thought that was a sign of the movie's bad quality in a way. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, people laugh.
Right.
And I was explaining to him the concept of, like, no, there's intentional black humor in the movie.
Laughing and screaming are cousins. They are both involuntary reactions that release tension.
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, I don't know about you, Dana, and when you had the experience shooting it, some of the sets I've been on where people laughed the most and had the best time were horror sets, without question. A big horror, like blood erupts and hits all the actors everywhere. The second you yell cut, everyone bursts into laughter. You know?
I find having a foot, you're the same way, having a foot in both worlds, like in the horror world and the comedy world, the people in the horror world are much less crazy than the people in the comedy world. Because they seem a lot more like dialed into who they are, and they're like super open with their emotions. And
maybe,
and I say this about myself as well. Comedians are all basket cases.
But I would also say the fringes of the horror people are more fucked up.
Sure,
than the fringes of the
that's true.
Yes, that is true until until you get to the absolute dregs.
I might bring somebody in on a call. We might do a group call in a minute. But
good idea.
I was thinking about that because I remember being at Monster Palooza, and there was, people, and there was a guy there. There was a booth, and it was just selling real crime scene photos.
Yes.
Of Sharon Tate's house in color. And I was like, no. there's nothing good about this.
Do you know what that reminds me of? The first time I went to Comic-Con, the first time I ever came to California, was like 1992. I went to my first San Diego Comic-Con, and half of the convention. Did you go back then, like that many years ago?
Yes.
Like
in fact, the person I went with the person I'm gonna bring in. Do you know Matt Weinhold, right?
Of course. Speaking of monster guys, yes, the King.
I went with Matt Weinhold and I went with Ken Daly. And we should just
Do you remember back then? Half of what they sold were porn tapes, and half of those would be illegal Tracy Lords tapes.
Yes, there was a lot of Tracy Lords.
and then I went in like 93, and it was like 75% of what they were selling. And it was like, there were very few comic books. And then in 94, they made a rule, no porn at Comic-Con. And I remember there were protests.
Yes.
Yes. And then within like 3 years, it became Comic-Con. Like by getting the scumbags out, they kind of
tapped the brake.
But what a year when the protests happened.
And by the way, I'm all for free speech. I don't think that's a bad thing, getting the porn out of Comic-Con.
No, not at all.
All right, hey, let me just give me a minute. I'm gonna call two people and see if I can get them in on all the call.
Hello?
Matt Weinhold.
Yes.
Dana Gould.
Dana!
How are you, man?
And Aaron Lee.
God you called.
It's Aaron Lee and Dana Gould. We're on a trunk call. A station-to-station trunk call.
Fantastic.
You know Aaron, right, by the way?
Yes, of course.
All right.
He's been on our show.
Monster Party?
Monster Party, yes.
It's weird that you won't let me on that show. Weird.
You wear clothes.
Yes. I wanted to talk to you because we were talking about the early days of Comic-Con.
Yes.
And we were remembering we were talking about when they used to sell porn at Comic-Con. Back in the early days, like early 90s, they would sell, a lot of the dealers were those big VHS box, and they would have, and Aaron, do you remember these? They would have those slick, glossy one-sheets that was like basically the cover of the cover of the box.
Winner of 4 AVN awards.
Yes.
Like it would say that kind of thing.
Bull Boner and Hustler.
So good porn movies.
Yeah. I think I was with you. When I saw this, there was a porn movie. I'm not going to say the title because I'm a parent, but the title was F My Dirty S-Hole.
Oh boy.
The movie. Ilya Salkin presents. It was F.
I saw the play.
Is this based on the play? It was F My Dirty S-Hole, the movie. And I, at the time, was on a sitcom called Working with TV's Fred Savage, who's a delight. And I literally stole 100 of those one sheets and went on to the set early the following week. And Steve Heitner and I lined the desk drawers of Fred Savage's desk on the set with posters for that, which today I think would get you fired from the show immediately.
I did something similar because I went to the electronics convention in Las Vegas.
Yeah, that was the big one.
Yeah, and John Wayne Bobbitt was there, and so I stole a bunch of his headshots, gave them to people. Yeah, it's like he loves you.
Was the porn show in Vegas 50% comic books? Were there comic dealers who kept sneaking in? Get the comic books out of here! You're ruining it.
Yeah.
Only Cherry Pop-Tart was allowed.
There's 2 titles labeled X-Men, but they're drastically different. I can ask you one question, then I'm gonna call a mutual friend of all of ours. Matt, what was the last horror movie that you saw?
It was a comedic vampire movie from France, and it was called Humanist Vampire Seeking Consenting Suicidal Person.
Oh, yeah.
And it was quite charming, well acted.
But in French, it was.
Exactly. That's how I found it because I'm fluent in French.
How did you
as
find
you
it?
know.
How did you find that movie?
It was one of those things where I forget which channel I was on or whatever. I still call them channels.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Shudder
it was just, it was if you've seen this, you might like this.
Okay,
So,
okay.
Yeah. And so we watched the trailer, my wife and I, we watched the trailer, and it just seemed really nice and charming. And so, and the humor is not too wacky. It doesn't hit you on the head. It's all about this little girl, and she's part of this vampire family. Something happens, and then it makes her so she doesn't want to feed. Then she meets this guy who wants to kill himself. She reveals that she's a vampire, and they work out this thing where he's like, I'm gonna let you kill me. But then, they start to like each other, and but it was really great.
That was the plot of a Dragnet radio show I listened to recently. Not a vampire thing, but like a crazy guy killed a woman that was also crazy, and she had asked him to kill her.
Oh,
wow!
That was a Dragnet.
It was a radio show. Radio show.
Ahead of its time.
I'm gonna send it to you.
I'm dying to hear that.
You think I'm lying?
Matt, when you said it was a funny vampire movie but not too broad, I was reminded of a gag in the parody film Silence of the Hams, starring Dom DeLuise, where they do a parody. When Dom DeLuise's character is introduced, they do a parody of Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula, where he rises up from the coffin, like standing up, but Dom DeLuise propelled himself with farts. He farted his way up and was standing upright. Would you call that too broad in a vampire comedy?
Well, not in the world that they created.
Good point. Okay.
Yeah.
But who could forget that classic moment from the 1996 Oscars when Glenn Close went, and the Oscar goes to Silence of the Hams.
I wish.
That was Karen Kilgariff's. That was Karen Kilgariff's Glenn Close impression. I'm gonna. How many people can you have on one of these group calls? Does anybody know?
I think it's infinite. I think it can just go on forever.
Fortunately for us, I have a very finite amount of people that will answer the phone when I call. But let me call our mutual friend, and then I'll let you all go. Hang on a minute.
Hello?
Ken Daly.
Dana.
Hey, man, what's up?
Nothing. How you doing?
Good. How's married life treating you?
Well, I'm about 14 hours into it, and it's very exciting. Totally different.
You got married last night.
By you at
I
your
was
home.
there. I was there.
It was nice. The tiniest wedding ever. It was lovely.
And you're as legally married as my gargantuan wedding. I'm on the phone with.
I had a gargantuan wedding.
Oh, I know. Yes, you could have. Mel could hit you with a tree. Congratulations, by the way. That was lovely.
Thank you so much.
I'm on the phone with two of your friends, Matt Weinhold and Aaron Lee.
I know those guys.
Hi, Ken.
Hi.
Hello. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
What was the last horror movie you have seen?
Speak No Evil.
Oh,
which is it's kind of a thriller, but it's a horror movie, I would say.
Is that the one that takes place on the island thing?
It was on an island. Maybe, yeah. It's a remote house.
Right.
It's kind of a cross between Vacation and Straw Dogs.
Is this
the remake? Yes, and I never saw the original.
Okay. The original is great.
Is it like Vacation crossed with Straw Dogs?
It is, yes.
All right, good. I was just waiting for Holiday Road to play at the end.
But a creepy, slow version, like in a trailer for like a Jordan movie.
Portishead sings.
Right. Acoustic guitar.
Yeah, but it was, I enjoyed it.
Sounds like someone went on a slaycation. We'll be right back. So did you see that in the theater?
I did. I like to see movies in the theater.
I still like to go.
Or I watch them on my Oculus headset in 3D.
Oh, yeah,
on
that's
my own
fun.
private IMAX.
Wow. I can't do that.
You can.
Well, I don't know. I
you get
can't.
nauseous?
No, I have. My left eye is very weak. My right eye is great. So I don't really have 3D.
3D?
I don't have a lot of great
you can watch
depth
it not
perception,
3D.
which makes driving with me fun.
Ooh.
Matt, Aaron, have you seen that?
Not the remake, no.
The original's great, supposedly.
The original is great, and
Yeah, I
the
need to see
original is one of those movies where after it was over, it stuck with me for like a week of just unnerved me, and I thought about it and all the implications of what they were trying to say in that film.
See, I don't know about you, Aaron, maybe you can weigh in. Movies like Straw Dogs make me so uncomfortable because they're highly probable. It's not like The Thing.
Right.
In real life, Dustin Hoffman is instantly killed and his wife is handed over to the mob.
And generally I'm not a fan of that as much as like a traditional horror movie. It's a little stressful. But this one just had the right level of, a little bit of black humor, a little bit of danger. It was good.
Yeah, that kind of home invasion genre, like funny games, is I will say it's not my favorite.
Both rough.
But when you go back to Jason movies, like, I don't have a problem with that because those are so over the top. And, after the first one, especially, they start to become like the Abbott and Costello movies. It's just this guy, who keeps in. Now he's in Manhattan. Now he's in space. And
it is really funny. Like in the 30s, the big monsters were Dracula, Frankenstein, and nowadays Jason and Mike,
and Fred.
Speaking of which, Blackula is a terrific older horror movie.
Blackula, and
rewatched recently, and it really is great.
Scream Blackula Scream.
I think Scream Blackula Scream is better than Blackula.
I agree.
They one, it's got Pam Grier, and they didn't just they developed the story. They like, all right, let's bring in voodoo. Let's bring in a different thing.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Now,
I think
when
you
it
always
comes
got
to
to add when you do a sequel.
Now, Blackenstein, not as good.
No.
Not as good as Blackula.
No, it doesn't hold a candle.
I have to see Blackenstein.
Yeah, you do.
And Black Jaws. Have you seen Black Jaws?
That'd be great.
Have you seen Sugar Hill, the blaxploitation zombie movie?
Never. I've never seen it.
That is great.
Oh, I gotta see that sometime.
That is great.
What is like a creature movie, a monster creature movie, not a psychological killer, of the past like 2-3 years that you recommend to people?
No One Will Save You.
That was mine.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that was fantastic.
That was mine. No One Will Save
And totally forgotten, kind of. I don't know why more people don't know about that thing, because it really is terrific.
I think it's brilliant.
I thought that last Predator sequel, Prey, was
phenomenal.
really good.
That was phenomenal.
Nobody, like, if that had gone out in theaters, I felt like it would have had good word of mouth, and you'd kind of know it, and I feel like people kind of didn't know it happened. So,
well, it was very brave of them to leave Predator out of the title.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's what made it great. It's like, oh, this is a Predator movie. This is fantastic. Yeah, I mean, Predator is basically the same idea as Gotham by Gaslight. Let's just tell this story in a different era.
Right.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yeah, no, I loved it. I thought it was terrific. And
I'll give you one more recent one along those lines that I thought I was really surprised how much I enjoyed it, because I'm not a huge fan of this franchise. A Quiet Place Day One.
Absolutely.
Really good.
It's better than the 2 prequels, I think.
Yeah.
Well, the 2 prequels. The 2 that came before.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what it was. Charming couple at the center of it. Oh, I like these two. They have chemistry. I want to see them survive. Like, just as simple as that.
Then you can make the whole goofy Quiet Place concept work because I like them.
I also like the fact that you got them in a city, because when I was watching that film, I was thinking about how they keep getting alien movies wrong. And so this one, you finally had the aliens in a city climbing up the sides of buildings. And I was thinking, like, this is what one of the Alien movies should have been.
Well, hopefully the TV series that's coming, Alien Earth, I think it's called, something like that, will do that. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, there's starring the Xenomorph?
Yes.
But I mean, it's that franchise. It's an Alien TV series.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It would be funny if it was just a remake of Barney Miller, but one of the cops was the Xenomorph.
Replace Fish.
Yeah, where's the Xenomorph? You hear the toilet flush, he comes out.
I'd watch that.
But for me, something that really scared me and really sort of captured Halloween is To Kill a Mockingbird.
Wow. Sure. When
the Halloween sequence with the
when
ham
they're the ham?
costume, and they're getting attacked by some crazy guy in the woods, and then Boo Radley at the end is terrifying, but then it turns out he's not so.
I would absolutely recommend Island of Lost Souls, 1932. The
very creepy.
Moreau.
Very creepy.
So good.
Yeah, and I would also say that those makeup effects work to this day. I mean, sure, Bela Lugosi, they just put a bunch of, fake hair on him. But the other ones, the really, it's amazing. Like the background creatures. Yeah, it's just like, how did you get from Romania to Dr. Moreau's Island?
Yeah, it's basically Bela Lugosi as Bob Weir in 1973. Well, guys, thank you so much for letting me take up your afternoon.
We hate talking about horror movies.
I will see you all. I will see you all very soon at some sort of haunted maze related situation.
Yay!
Success.
Now listen, Wilbur. I know there's no such a person as Dracula. You know there's no such a person as Dracula. But does Dracula know it?
It's a wistful autumn, sun-dappled day. High atop the Mulholland Drive view shelf here in sunny Southern California, temps dipping down into the mid-70s as we brave the Arctic blasts that are just right around the corner. We'll have to learn to live in 50 and 60 degree temperatures. My guest today is what we like to call a friend of the podcast, friend of the show, a good friend of mine, and a stellar talent in terms of his career. He has been a rock star, an actor of note and renown. He is an author. He has a little foot massage place down in Koreatown that I like so much. But more than anything, he is known to fans of the black arts of magic. Rob Zabrecki, or as he is known when the sun dips down below the horizon, Zabrecki.
Hi, Dana.
Hey, man, how goes it?
It's going. That introduction, that was what you really talked me up there.
Yeah, there's a wordgasm. Now, you must have been, you grew up in the San Fernando Valley.
Yes.
You must have had some rad Halloweens as a kid.
No, certainly not.
This interview is over.
I mean, I think it depends how you define rad. And looking back at it, I would say they were definitely something I looked forward to, but it started after dinner, after kind of a goulash soup type of thing my mother would make with pumpkin related. And then you would put on your homemade costume or maybe a Ben Cooper type of costume you get at the thrifty drugstore.
Natch.
Yeah.
Or Collegeville.
Or yeah, exactly. And grab a pillowcase that was, worn down, that wasn't really being used in the household, and then walk around the block a few times and not go too terribly far. I was in the flat lands of Burbank, kind of what they call Magnolia Park now. So like Hollywood Way, Magnolia, that area that's kind of been built up. But back then it was pretty quiet. It was pretty dead. So I had heard rumors back then we're talking like say mid 70s into, the cutoff was probably like 78, 79 for me.
Yeah.
And
then you became cool.
Exactly. Discovering cigarettes and trick-or-treating didn't go together. Those are hard out. But the thing is, we'd hear these rumors of, over in Toluca Lake, the next town over,
sure,
Bob Hope's house, and he's given silver dollars and full candy bars.
Full bars in Toluca Lake. Yeah.
And but getting to Bob Hope's house and or even knowing where that was as big as a mystery as like losing your virginity. You just did not. That was just not something you knew about. So my Halloweens were primarily walking around the blocks with my, when I was a little kid with my older brother and sister, and just doing what everybody else did in the 70s, and get that kind of sack full of candy, and then get home, put it out on your bed, and then go nuts. But we always loved it. And I remember one year I was Dracula, and I was really proud of my little homemade costume, and it was fun. And I have no photos of it, but I have fond memories of it.
I have we had pretty good, we lived in a good neighborhood for it. And not only did I live I lived in suburban Massachusetts, but we lived in the neighborhood of the cemetery. I lived on Cemetery Street. That was my childhood address, 9 Cemetery Street. And it was a little street, and it went down and ended in the cemetery. And you go, and it's where I learned to ride a bike and do many other things. That sounded nefarious. It wasn't. So I learned how to ride a bike.
Getting images when you said I did have a flurry.
It's where I would go to ride a bike, play Army, Dark Shadows, and or Wild Wild West. But because I was a little brother, I always had to be Artemis Gordon. But we had 100 kids between like 11 and 16 in my neighborhood. And we just moved in a feral pack. And we would go into other towns. Like it was a thing, and because I was with older brothers and 100 kids, my parents didn't worry as much as they would, because it was like, well, if one's gone, they're all gone, because they all went out together. I believe there's a Bob's Burgers episode about this, that the mystical goal on Halloween was full bars. They're giving away full bars. Gotta go, man.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, yeah.
And they didn't start, like, definitely in Southern California, Halloween has picked up because it's such a business. Like, it starts now. We're recording this in mid-September, and it's going. CVS puts their decorations up August 30th.
Yes.
It's up, It wasn't like that, I imagine, back in the 70s. It was like 2 weeks beforehand. You go get a Casper suit or whatever.
Exactly. Get the with the wax fangs and stuff. Yeah, it was really low tech and low key, and kind of, I kind of miss that in a way, because now, like you say, you walk into CVS or any hardware store and you're just getting inundated with garbage.
Yeah.
Just not interesting.
Any costume is good unless your costume is about how clever your parents are. It's like some kid with a bunch of dollar bills on his sweatshirt. I'm the deficit. Go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
Get off my porch.
Exactly.
I'm unfair trade practices.
Yeah.
But in America, it wasn't specific to Halloween, but starting in there's these things called spook shows that you're something of an expert on. And like in some of the histories I've read about them, it starts in like 1799 with the magic lantern and stuff. Now your as Zabrecki, you're doing a spook show at the Mayan here in LA. And that's on October 3rd at the Mayan in LA. And what will that entail? What do you have to do to throw a spook show at the Mayan?
Well, you have to try to recreate what this subculture that sent chills down America's spine from the 1930s through the 1960s, and try to recreate what those were. And I think just to define spook shows and what they are, a shock show or a ghost show or a midnight ghost show or midnight horror show. There's many
midnight ghost shows, they would call them as well.
Yeah, they would. They're all different. There's several different. There's like, new wave punk, ska, rockabilly. You can pick your poisons with that. Be more specific, and all of them were slightly specific because one kind of led to the next. But it really entails a spooky or a Grand Guignol themed magic act, right? And that leads into inevitably something called a blackout. And in a true spook show form, that would culminate into a screening of a horror film. So spook shows were these combinations of spooky themed magic show paired with horror film. And that was the winning combination that started in 1930, and it really went all the way through the 60s. And hopefully we can talk about the fun ride that some of these performers had, because it was
there are some amazing people and boy, like, talk about missing my calling. Born too late.
Same. I feel that way all the time. But
to be Elwin. But
oh my God. Well, yeah, Elwin, who was like the Ramones or the Elvis of the spook show, who really kicked that off. And I'd love to get his origin a little bit. But
it started. Let me.
Yeah, of course.
It was it evolved from like the Magic Lantern show to this thing called Pepper's Ghost.
Yes,
there were all of these sort of stage tricks that work their way through Grand Guignol and music hall. But what we know as a, quote, spook show, grand American tradition. I don't know if it's American. It might be European.
It's American. Absolutely American.
Yeah, it feels American. It feels very American. That really clicked off in the 1930s, and they were at midnight. People stayed up later back then. How did they get their beginning, and who was at the forefront of that?
I'll tell you exactly who it was. There was a guy named Elwin, and Elwin worked for Universal. He was in Utah, Salt Lake City area, and he was a magician, and he had a stage show.
Real name, Elwin Charles Peck.
Exactly. Yes. And not a lot of photos of him, turns out, as he's kind of difficult a little dodgy to find imagery of him. Some of his concert or his performance ads and photos or images of him do appear, but they're pretty scarce. So he was working for Universal in 20s, and remember, there's the rise of horror films, right? And we have seances in the 20s. And we have big magicians like Carter and Thurston who are putting seance-themed shows into their big touring act. So some of the biggest vaudeville performers are doing these kind of we're going to that supernatural realm. We're warming up for it.
And Houdini's kind of in there at this time as well, but he's the antithesis of these guys.
Exactly, because in 1913 he lost his mother and he wanted nothing more. He was a mama's boy, a little unknown fact, but he wanted to reach his mother. So he goes to see these mediums and very quickly learns that every medium, every psychic is a fraud, and they're performing these half-baked magic tricks to read his mind to contact his mother. And this infuriated him. Although it didn't infuriate Carter and Thurston, who were making bundles of cash, touring the United States and Europe doing these shows. Meanwhile, seances are happening. So
spiritualism is on the rise and all that.
Yes, exactly.
I'm sorry. I'm just.
I know it's there's so much to get to, but so I'm saying that I think the culture was ready for something to happen. But in particular, to really tie Elwin into this and to push this conversation forward. So Elwin's primed in this world. He's a stage magician. He knows about horror films. He likes horror films, and this is the incredible idea that he realizes, hey, the theater closes. The last screening is at 9:00. People leave the theater and they don't come back in the theater until tomorrow for the matinee. So there's a big window where nothing's going on. What if I come in and I do my magic show and we pair it with a screening of a horror film? And
now, this is the 20s, so it's not Frankenstein the Wolfman. It's before that. It's mostly Lon Chaney Sr. stuff.
Oh, for sure.
The opera and all that stuff.
Right. This is around 1929, 1930. So we're just getting into the early universe.
Just getting into it.
Exactly. So everything is like, it's this perfect storm that's happening. So these theater owners in Salt Lake City are saying, yeah, why not do this? And very quickly it proves to be a success. People show up. They're buying tickets. The theater owners are thrilled because they're getting a whole extra batch of a whole round of ticket sales because of Elwyn, and so this became a thing. And he quickly started making flyers and ephemera, which are totally iconic today. If you look at them, it's like looking at an early Blondie concert handbill. It's just incredible. You just want to study every font and see all the surrounding information.
Beautiful, so beautiful. I have a couple. Well, we both do. We both have a couple real ones.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Yes, we're fortunate to want to hold on to some of this stuff.
Yeah.
So
Scott Alexander also has a big collection.
Yes, yeah. I know. And a guy, and there's a few other collectors for sure. That people that have. I'm not even a collector myself. I've just kind of come across a few.
Well, there's one thing that I've found in talking to other guys that collect old spook show posters. The one common thread, big with the ladies.
Big with, well, not my ladies so much. That's it. Maybe, is there another room for that?
Chick's like, who's the guy with the Carter poster? Here's something never said. Who's that on the unicycle? No one ever said that.
Exactly.
Now, when were Carter and Thurston going?
They were the golden age of magic. So, I want to say 1850 to 1950. They're, kind of kicking around.
So they did not pair motion pictures with their shows. That was not a...
Well, towards the end of the career, they did. And this is something they probably would have looked down on originally because they were these vaudeville headliners. But then later on, as their careers were, I won't say on the decline, but they've been doing this for a long time. And spook shows became such a massive thing. They went, you know what? I'll do a spook show, right? So originally they inspired that world because they were headlining these theaters, just doing their magic shows at a reasonable time at 8 p.m., let's just say. But later on, the spook shows became a phenomenon. They both, along with Blackstone, Carter, Virgil, there was many of these, pretty much every major touring, famous magician, they engaged in doing spook shows because it was profitable.
Right. They're just printing money. I was like 3,000 a night or 3,000 a week in 1930, which is
pretty crazy.
And one of them, it might have been Elwyn. We get into it. I was read that he knew that a theater, like he would do the spook show and then there'd be a movie. And then he goes, and then at the other theater, we can do a movie and then a spook show. And we can just run from show to show and do two. And it just like.
It was called bicycling. And they were sending
bicycling
forth and just how many barrels of cash they needed to fill up their pockets would have been lots of bags of money they need to fill their money bags. Anyway, so the thing is, so Elwyn's doing this spook show, and so far it's kind of a fluke, right? It's almost, this is what I would say, like the Ramones thing. Like, so the Ramones are playing, they're amazing. People are to this, and then. At some point,
where is he geographically? Where does he start?
He's in Salt Lake City.
Okay, so not where I would. Yeah,
don't ask me. He's doing the circuit in Salt Lake City, Utah, whatever. So here's the deal: he's on
Mormons. They love it,
buying the tickets. So he's driving one night and he sees another magic truck with the middle of the night. There, he's driving and he passes in the truck. They pull over, and it's a man called Greystoke. And Greystoke is doing his, let's call it, tired magic act. It's not grand themed. It's classic magic. He's not selling a lot of tickets. He's doing matinee shows and he's getting by. Right. But Elwyn is like, oh, I'm doing these things at night with this spooky themed act. And then I'm pairing it with a horror movie and I'm doing really well. So Greystoke says, I want in.
Right. And just so people know, when you say Grand Guignol, that refers to what?
Grand Guignol would have been like spooky themed theater, bloody theatrical theater throughout Europe,
Right.
Fake blood.
Yeah, there's a lot of like it'd be a play. It would be a stage presentation, but somebody would get beheaded, or there'd be blood. It was sort of like slasher theater.
The earliest forms of slasher theater. That's a great way to put it. Yes, exactly.
Just so people can know.
Yeah.
I like that he wasn't a dick. Like that he wasn't like, I'm not going to tell him about my gold mine. He's like, dude, you got to do this. This is great.
Well, don't give him too much credit because it came with the price. He got a cut. He got a cut on it.
Well, all right.
And that's okay. So Greystoke takes the name Alibaba. You're like, Grace, you're too white. We got to mix it up.
Oddly, Greystoke, Lord of the Apes.
What?
That was Tarzan's original name, Lord Greystoke.
Oh, I didn't know that. Mm-hmm. More of a spook show guy. I got to get on my Tarzan.
Also, just the profound arrogance of that. Like, the jungle is, 500 million people of color and one white guy, and he's like, well, I guess I'm Lord.
Yeah, I'll be the hero of all this. Exactly.
I guess I'm the boss.
That's where it catches on. That's where television and Blondie and the Cramps all start coming together. Hey, let's put these shows on, and it became a thing.
Right.
A guy named Francisco on the West Coast sees what's going on. He's like, I want in. So these are the early stages of the spook shows in the early 1930s. There's almost like a template. These guys use the same, very similar graphics. Sissy, stay at home. Shudders, shrills, shrieks, all caps, and these great fonts and these great weird-looking skeletons that are these.
Yeah, on one of the posters I have is this shrieky, screamy.
It's the best. I mean, it's some of the best verbiage. And these posters, to me, they suck you right in. You look at them and they just grab you and they pull you into this world, and they don't let you out until you're running for your life.
Yeah, and it is exactly what you say. Like, it's so specifically its own world.
Yes,
and I do just want to live there.
Me too. I must say, at this point, one of my dear friends is a magic historian. His name is Mike Caveney, and he is one of the writers of the Taschen 15-pound magic book on magic that Taschen put out. And Mike is an expert on stone lithographs that can tell you the difference between all these different posters and how they were produced. And
wow,
and he hates spook show posters. He thinks they're the lowest form of the art. So,
it turned on him so quickly.
I know. So, Mike, if you're listening, I just hope that you have a change of heart one day and you look at one of these, Elwyn posters or Silkini or Dr. Neff.
So beautiful. So beautiful. And well, I don't know if you've ever heard of a business out here called Poster Mountain.
Of course. Yeah, they do all the mounting and linen backing.
Yeah. And they do a lot of restoration for the Academy of Motion Pictures and things. And my friend John owns it.
Wow.
And he basically, all through COVID, what kept them not only open and afloat, but in the black was David Copperfield's collection. Just linen backing, restoring.
The people that do that are like surgeons. They go in so meticulous. And they also do posters for auction houses and places like that.
They've done stuff for me. They're amazing.
You can bring them a chipped, an old poster that was on a signpost or whatever, some of those old flat, big old posters. And if they're chipped and they're missing pieces, they can restore them beautifully.
I've seen them restore entire panels. Like if a 6 panel and a panel's missing, they'll just restore it. It's by hand. It's just astounding. Yeah. And those posters, again, like, an old punk rock poster, there's a very specific art to them that, and it's one of my favorite words. It's ballyhoo, which makes me question the Houdini thing. Like, I get that Houdini really wanted to speak to his mom, and he would go to these spiritualists and these fortune tellers, and he would debunk them. Not because he wanted to prove it wasn't true. He wanted it to be true, but he was like, no, I know the trick. He's going to find this. But people like Elwyn and Alibaba, they seemed to me that they weren't pretending to be anything other than what they were. It's like, we're having a good time. Come on in.
Yeah, here's the thing. There's no footage of these guys performing. It's sad that we don't have, it's kind of, there were obviously there was, films were being cranked up, but nobody was, bringing a camera and filming any of these spook show performers. It just wasn't, because it was this ephemeral thing. It was a live show. Just wasn't something that was done. So we don't know how good Elwyn was. We don't know how good Francisco or, Alibaba were. But what I do know is that about 10, 15 years into as this thing really becomes a thing, and it's an American phenomenon, it takes off. So now it's all over. It's a national thing. In every part of the country, there are people doing spook shows, and they go from one town to the next. There's a touring circuit. It's a thing. But it wasn't until a guy called Dr. Silkini comes along that he says, hey, you know what? These things are fine, but it's lacking something, a sense of humor. And he's the guy that brought comedy, hypnosis, and a little bit of sleaze to it. So I think that's kind of the next major turning point in spook shows. And also, don't get me wrong, from what I understand, also would do a full-on blackout, and then they would go into a horror movie. So he followed the format of it, but he just added comedy to it, essentially, which I thought was really interesting, because up until that point, they were probably done very seriously, making these serious claims. Tonight, we contact the dead, and this probably trying to do their best Bela Lugosi or,
Right. Yeah, his name was Dr. Silkini, which there has to be at least one pimp named Dr. Silkini. His real name was he was Jack Baker. And right. what I love, it was Dr. Silkini's Asylum of Horrors. And this is just I'm reading off a photo of a ticket.
Oh, the tickets were amazing themselves.
Yeah, the tickets are horrid.
I wouldn't even be able to give that ticket to the ticket. I
want to keep it.
Yeah.
It says a giant midnight stage and screen show on stage, Asylum of Horrors, with the Frankenstein monster in person, plus a creepy horror feature on screen at the Capitol Theater in Trenton, New Jersey. God bless them. Then to the entire right of the ticket is faint check. In case you pass out before seeing a complete performance of this double horror stage and screen show, this check entitles you to return if you report to the doorman when leaving, or in case you are afraid to go home in the dark after seeing this show, this ticket entitles you to ask for an usher to escort you home.
Oh, yeah. Come on.
Boy, ushers would really go the extra mile back then.
The thing I don't know. Sold myself. That's just the mailman. This is immersive theater. This is an early form of immersive theater. These people are going out. They're having these experiences. Monsters are coming in the audience.
Yeah.
What's the difference between that and a screening of Rocky Horror or The Room, or what people are,
or to go back further, William Castle's entire career was basically this without, but because the Dr. Silkini, and I'm sure Elwyn would do there would be a blackout where you'd be in the theater. It would be the denouement of the magic show. And then everything goes black. And then not only is there glow in the dark ghosts going over your head, but people I read running up and down the aisles with mops, just flicking water on people, or they just feel something weird in the dark. It's like a horror maze. It's like a haunted house maze.
Right. Exactly.
And then they would show a movie. Then they'd show Frankenstein.
Exactly. And you bring a date to this, and hopefully you're clutching onto each other, because it's what a great way to spend a Friday night. You're in the dark with, somebody who you want to know a little more intimately. Amazing. It all just worked, it really did. It really did work.
What I also love, and I don't know who did this originally, it looks like Silkini, but there's beheadings, there's a seance, there's a spook show, and a gorilla.
Exactly.
Yes, that mystic purveyor of the supernatural.
Yes,
a gorilla.
He escaped from the zoo when I was walking over here. We're just going to chain him up to the wall over here. Don't worry, everything's fine. He'll be fine. Yeah, and then of course the gorilla breaks loose, and that's it's helter skelter, and then the movie. So yeah, it was a. But yeah, you talk about those crude, very kind of low tech, almost cut out skulls and ghosts and ghouls and witches and things. And I've seen a lot of these props in person, and they really are like the most crude stencil, what you would think about when you're drawing the most primary ghost, right?
Yeah.
They were holding. So it wasn't like they were going for this mad technology. It was like, well, this is what's available. We've got some luminescent paint. We've got some cardboard, and that's what and it would pack small and play big. So these things were, kind of like, and worked night after night. There was no human error with them. I just had to have somebody in the dark walking down the aisle holding these things. And
the skulls. You did a what would you call it? You spoke about it. You gave a lecture, I guess would be the word. It was more entertaining than a lecture about spook shows. And you were kind enough to share some of your slides. And yeah, the pictures of those skulls are just like, that's it.
Yeah. But look, you're in the dark. It's midnight. You've just seen a bunch of spooky seance magic.
You just met a gorilla, for God's sake.
Yeah, exactly. It's all, you might, if you believe, you will receive. That's always the rule of the seance and this stuff. So
the other great thing about Silkini show is they would promise that a member of the audience would go home with a real dead body. The fact that it was of a chicken was still as advertised.
Stop splitting hairs.
This I love again. Then you get into the William Castle showmanship of it all. They would hire people to protest the show. Because it was the work of the devil.
Yeah. The master of that there's a guy called Raymond.
Yeah.
And Raymond was cool. He almost had the look of like
not to be confused with Raymond.
Not to be spelling different. Yeah.
They didn't really it's like, really, you want to take 5 more minutes?
Yeah, exactly.
I believe that Zachary before he was Zachary was Raymond, or he had just before it was only like a week or two. I'd have to look it up, but he had a name before he was Zachary, and I think it was something really simple like Raymond or something.
Oh, wow. Yeah. But back to Raymond. So yeah, hyphenate his name like, maybe that was a nod to Owen. I don't know. I presumed it was. It's just, why not? Because it would have made sense. But he was the master of setting up these lobby displays, bringing in the coffins, having a skeleton in the ticket booth, hiring the protesters. And there's one story with Raymond where someone actually came and stole they stole a coffin, and they got 2 blocks away, and then the cops came, and so the kids just left this coffin on the street, and it was a big pain in the ass for them to kind of get back to the theater. But his displays were amazing. And I think, again, back to that ephemeral thing where you walk in a movie theater and there's this whole display of like, what's going on here? It's like we're in a funeral parlor. It's like he really was the stage.
And the name of those shows are great. Again, I'm looking at some of his posters. It was the show of 1,001 horrors, because you have a show of 1,000 horrors. 1,001, I'm listening.
It's funny you mentioned that, because the 1,001 was a number that was used with different performers for some reason. I don't know. There was something about that palindromic that it was using it, because there's my favorite spook show poster is called Shrieks in the Night. It's this big green day glow poster. It's beautiful. It's a kind of like almost like a 3-sheet almost. It's very large. Mm-hmm. And that poster has so much information on it, and I can't wait to unpack it. And when I do I'm going to do a talk at the Philosophical Research Society later this month, and I do look forward to like breaking down Dr. Satan's Shrieks in the Night, what all that means, because there's many different elements to this. And I knew I was an acquaintance of Dr. Satan, who's someone that I knew, and he was married to Irene Larson, one of the founders of the Magic Castle,
or as we call them, Dr. and Mrs. Satan. I didn't know that he went by Dr. Satan at times.
He did, yeah. And
perfect. What a great name.
It was a great name, and he was a really interesting man. His name was John Daniel. He was from Pasadena, really fascinating guy, and
God's country.
Exactly. The Paris of the San Marino Valley, right?
Gateway to Glendale.
So he's out there doing magic, and at some point, there's this guy called Joe Karsten, Midwest guy, who's franchising out all these shows, and he meets John, and John says, is interested in doing a spook show. So he goes, "You're going to be Dr. Satan." He sends all these posters out. So these posters were stock, right? Because they would just say "and horror film."
Right.
So Satan presents 101 thrills, kills, all that kind of stuff. A woman runs crazy, runs wild in the audience. A gorilla escapes from here. A real monster comes to life.
Right. Jungle worms and swamp rats run across your feet.
Exactly. A painting of Vincent van Gogh materializes, and kind of you can see what the magic tricks are that were built into these posters. That should you or I want to be Dr. Satan, we would learn a certain number of these pieces, would all culminate in a blackout and would all lead up to the screening of.
It was basically, the Dr. Satan franchise.
Exactly. That's exactly right. With no irony.
No, it's great. It's
just what was going on. And so I'll tell you that, I interviewed John about 20 years ago. I was putting together a live spook show at the Larson House, which is the Magic Castle before the Magic Castle in Hollywood started at a house down in Hancock Park.
Right.
God,
I've been there, yeah. Brookledge.
We spent time there together. Yes, of course. It's a wonderful covenant.
We're men of the world. People listening should just know.
I know, and I hate even talking about it because it's such a magical place. I always feel like I'm
I know.
Very privileged or bragging, but
it always is. It always is.
It was a very magical grounds there.
I was there one night.
Mm-hmm.
This is super name droppy and what I don't care. I was there one night at a show hanging out, talking to Paul Rubens, just, there chatting. And I thought 14-year-old me would have never imagined something this cool. It would just be beyond the pale.
And then Elvira interrupts the conversation.
Yeah, it's just crazy.
It's like, where's the bathroom? It's that kind of, It was that kind of place. And it was a great winter time. And we put on.
It was like the Playboy Mansion for nerds.
It was, because it really wasn't. I mean, I never did anything subversive there. And it was.
No, it's in the spirit of let's put on a show. And that's what I love about the spook shows is, it's and we're getting into the area where William Castle steps in but it's all there's a really, to me, really appealing innocence to it, that it's it's like a carnival.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that there was a turn there where it was very innocent. And then in the mid 50s, teenage exploitation becomes a thing. Rebel Without a Cause spawns, countless teenagers who now want to go fuck shit up with plates.
Yeah, the birth of the American teen. Because it is interesting. They did stop during World War II, where it was just we can get our horror. We get our horror all day.
Yes, exactly.
We'll hold off on that.
Yes.
And then in the way that I remember after 9/11, they Universal Studios did not do they didn't do Halloween Horror Nights for 3 or 4 years after 9/11. They took a big long break.
Yeah.
And it's just there's a balance of when does this become fun again?
Yeah. And it did.
And it did. And it picked right back up in the first, but then you get, in the early 50s, the birth of the American teenager. Spook shows perfectly designed for them. And I don't know what it is. It's a combination of available transportation or disposable income because of the post-war economy. But teenagers become their own demographic. They are no longer just thought of as soon to be adults. They're their own they're their own thing, and their social life perfectly fits in with the idea of a spook show.
Definitely. Yeah. And that went on for a good, throughout the 50s. It was in the early 60s or mid 60s when things took the last sort of dive out with this, and it's what I call the demise. And that was when I think teenagers wanted to do stuff like take acid and dance and do things, spend their times in nightclubs as opposed to spending them in late night in these theaters. So there's a great story that when I interviewed John and Irene Larson, the founder of the Magic Castle, when they were touring, they were based, of course, as I mentioned, in Pasadena, but they're all the way in Florida. And one night, at this point in their spook shows, they're checking kids at the door because they're bringing in water balloons and they're bringing in eggs and they're throwing trash from, the concession at the performers. They're not loving this, but they're getting through it. Well, one night, Irene's standing up, they're doing the spook show and she hears these little thumps, thump, 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 a series of thumps. And she doesn't know what that is until the lights come up at the end of the night. They're cleaning up, and she looks on the screen, and there's 24 darts piercing the movie screen. And that was the night that Irene said, "I'm done. I quit spook shows. I want out. This is not, You
lose an eye.
You lose an eye, and God knows that I can only imagine how horrible that would be." So they drove back to California. Irene and John Daniel divorce. Irene meets Bill Larson. Bill, of course, is the brother of Milt Larson. And in 1963, the Magic Castle opens its doors, and that all starts. So that was...
And was that also part of because I don't know much about the history of the Magic Castle. Was that their way of going like, yeah, I want to be a musician, but I just want to live at home?
No, they were already based in. Bill and Milt came from a family of magic, so they were steeped in this world already. They were maybe I guess you could call them nepo babies of the 30s, because their dad was kind of a hotshot magician and lawyer in town, and was a man who very well respected man, put a bunch of magical manuscripts. So they were in the world, but they in their early 20s were writing for a TV show called Truth or Consequences.
Truth or Consequences.
So they're working up at Hollywood and Highland. In that, that cool old building that's looks like a church. It's like the one building that's still standing at Hollywood and Highland. You got pins on one corner. You've got
across from the Ripleys.
Exactly.
Museum.
And it's been there forever. And it used to be offices and the production offices.
I know the building.
I'm sure you've been in there for one thing or another. Anyway,
I have.
Milt and Bill worked there. That's where they had their writer's room. And they looked down on the Magic Castle at 7001 Franklin, a couple blocks away, this old Victorian mansion. And they said, that's where we should have this magic club. And that's how that all kind of took off.
And what was it? What was it? A home before it was a Magic Castle?
It was a house built in 1908 for a real estate magnate named Roland B. Lane. He lived there till 1940. It was sold, reopened as a old folks home, a brothel, and a lower-end apartment complex.
An old folks home and brothel. That seems like a dicey combination.
It was. And the whole place was cut up in a different... If you've been to the Magic Castle...
Hello, sugar.
You would know that now it's kind of expansive and there's big rooms. But back then, it was a bunch of small... They were just kind of created rooms within rooms so they could, get as much, kind of revenue from the space that they could. Anyway.
Wow. Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. Wow.
So anyway, that was her ex. That was Irene's ex. It was starting the Magic Castle. John Daniel retires from doing spook shows. And just a couple years later, the iconic, at least in my mind, film Monsters Crash the Pajama Party, the 1965 be-all end-all spook shows came out. And that, we mentioned Joe Carson earlier, the guy who was franchising out all of those Dr. Satan shows.
Right. And this was a movie specifically made to work with a spook show.
100%.
Yeah.
It was the most low rent. It's who knows if these kids ever worked as actors before. It's a wonderful B movie. It's in the spirit of our good friend Ed Wood, right?
Yes.
And in the movie,
directed by David Hewitt, who directed, I believe, The Time Travelers.
Oh, I didn't know that. Mm-hmm. So in the movie, a monster. It's a bunch of sorority kids go to a haunted house for the weekend. The plot's very flimsy, but interesting. and and a monster escapes from the screen, goes into the audience. So in real time, this whatever that you would kind of watch the film and then get the monster costume, dress in it, and then as you're watching from backstage, and then you would kind of come out as the monster, leave the screen, grab the girl from the audience, take her backstage, and at the end of the night, she would, that would be that. So that was how that was Monsters Crash the Pajama Party, and that was really the end of the live spook show.
Now, what year was The Tingler? Because these are very similar ideas. The Tingler also has a
that Castle would have been
62 or something, maybe.
So maybe even earlier. I'm not even sure.
So great.
But at that point, it was like, it's over. These kids, no one's buying tickets. These teenagers are rude. They're taking acid and coming to our shows. And for a brief time, they tried to do them at drive-in theaters, which was a horrible idea because there was no backstage setting. Most of America didn't want to see Halloween in the middle of summer. This was it wasn't it didn't match. Something about being inside of a theater at midnight, that's one thing, but at 7:00, in Wichita, Kansas.
Yeah. There's a commercial that we excerpted a part of this commercial in the opening montage of the show for the White Horse Drive-In Theater.
Here in person tonight, White Horse Drive-In Theater, the trial of the dead. 18 living nightmares leap from the stage. All lights go out and the monsters are released from their coffins. They may grab you. Victims from the audience will be thrown from the stage a piece at a time. Human heads chopped off. Jungle worms and swamp rats run around your feet. Extra on stage, back from the grave. The spirit materialization of Bruce Lee, King of Kung Fu. It's real. On stage, not a movie. You may need help. Help! Help! Tonight, White Horse Drive-In Theater.
Oh my God.
It's kind of great. The Tingler is 1959, by the way.
59. Okay, that sounds right. Yeah, so it was all relative in the same relative,
Yeah, and House on Haunted Hill. Yeah, so William Castle was a movie director, movie producer that incorporated spook show elements into his theatrical releases. The House on Haunted Hill had a skeleton fly over the audience that came literally out of the screen. In the way that they would do during a spook show blackout, but he called it Emergo. And if you've anybody listening, there's William Castle's amazing filmography: House on Haunted Hill, The Tingler, 13 Ghosts, and then there's a great movie about William Castle, that Joe Dante directed called Matinee, which explains what that was.
I thought it was I loved it. I thought it was wonderful.
Yeah, it was super great.
And that kind of put the kibosh on it. All those performers retired. They got, obviously they had this was the span of their career that many of them went back to just performing straight up magic. They went back to ditch the ghoulish aspects of it, but they were magicians by trade, so they still liked to perform. They finished out their careers, became presidents of their local magic clubs, etc. Wrote books, and kind of went on with it. And then for me, the next little connection to all of this is the emergence of Rocky Horror Picture Show, the midnight showing. So again, the theater ain't nothing happening in the theaters.
Right. Yeah.
And
there were offshoots, like you could say William Castle was an offshoot, and horror hosts like Zachary and Vampira, and then Goulardi and Elvira later, were all very much of that school. And then you're right, Rocky Horror is sort of the next evolution of that. This theater is empty at midnight. Want to sell some popcorn and tickets at midnight? Sure.
Yeah, I get it was like that lightning in a bottle thing, which is it was so fascinating because as a teenager, I loved that Rocky Horror, the idea of there being a midnight show, not having no idea what the origins of any of this stuff. Had no idea where and how this came about. And then in recent years, I don't know if you caught or are a fan of the Room.
I've never seen The Room. I know all about it. Ken Daly used to go like every week. I was when my kids were too little to enjoy The Room.
Well, Dana, you and I have a field trip in our near future, and
I'll happily go to The Room. I'll happily see.
I would like to buy you a ticket, and
I will buy you, and I will buy you a soda pop.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, sure, you can screen it at home, but really,
no, you got to go in the theater.
I saw it in Westwood about 4 years ago, and I was blown away. It was the coolest thing I'd ever seen, and it was packed.
Yep.
It's midnight screening. Kids are. I won't say. I don't want to give it. It's hard to give away anything with the room because it's just such an odd abstract.
Yeah, it is Ed Woody, and it's what is the combination of incompetence and sincerity.
Well said. Yes. So much more. There's so much to it. It's just such a work of art to me. I just love it so much. But anyway, I think it plays at midnight in Westwood. So in the foreseeable future, we'll
go
and catch that because it's pretty great.
Was there a Rocky Horror going when you were a kid,
Yes.
a young punk?
Yes.
Was it at the New Art? Where was Rocky Horror?
Yeah, it was at the New Art, but near in LA, it would have been, they did screenings in North Hollywood, not too far from where I'm at now. They had them all over the place. And it was the screenings were, it's just the Valley Plaza, it would have been there.
Really?
In the 80s, yeah.
With a local cast, and then they would do.
Yeah. And you see, it's just these random kids who, were giving it their all. And it was.
Yeah. The high school theater.
Yes.
Club.
Yeah. Yeah, it was great. In my mind, that's like the full circle, the cycle of this spook show thing is so fascinating. And there's so many different offshoots of each little, you can go down to each.
Like you could see I can see that the I wouldn't say resurgence, but what would be the word that, the widespread success of Halloween mazes, which I think was always around, but it's as Halloween becomes a bigger and bigger American holiday, definitely incorporates a lot of the tricks from spook shows. And by and large, there's a same kind of attitude. I do find the more low rent, the better. Like you always go to Universal Studios to do it, but it's so slick. It's like the Vegas version. I like it when I'd rather go to LA City College's spook show.
I couldn't agree with you more. Although I did enjoy the haunted hayride at Griffith Park was really
the haunted hayride's great.
I was actually really truly scared at one point, going like, anyone could kind of get in here, and if you're going to go on a murdering spree, this would be a pretty good way to go out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, you're right. I saw people
thinking for myself. I didn't actually do it, but maybe someone else did. I don't know.
One time just happened to look over and saw two people boning. Like, no, it's not very scary. But happy Halloween, kids.
Exactly. Sissy, stay home. No children tickets are to be sold.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, there's and then Dark Harbor at the Queen Mary, which is purportedly haunted anyway. Yeah. There's lots of great ones. Not Scary Farm is,
a few years ago, I had the good fortune of working down at one of the theaters at Knott's I did 104 shows over the Halloween season.
I did. Yeah. We all came down, and that weird little outdoor. But it was great. It was exactly what we did. And you do like how long was your 20 minutes?
Yeah, 20 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. And you do like 5 a night?
Yeah, 4 a night. And then it was literally, I have half an hour break, and you get a kind of a fast pass when you
sure, yeah.
And I got to know all the guys. Oh, here comes the guy again. I was like,
it's great.
Coming through my little suit, but I love them. I thought they're high, they're glossy, they're very polished, but it's really fun. And
but that's really, Dr. Z hosted the Mummies at Alex's bar this weekend. It was the Mummies, a couple other bands. Was the Mummies, the Latinos, what's the Rock and Roll Adventure Kids from Northern California? But getting in, as I call it, in the rig. In the toilet I don't have a dressing room. I'm in the toilet of a bar, the green room toilet. And it's like, yeah, I'm in show business.
Well, Danny, you've had some pretty privileged experiences.
Well, but that's what I mean. It keeps you up, but you got to do both. You have to do both. It's like, that makes you appreciate the good stuff.
You're among the coolest performers that would even know who the mummies are. That's phenomenal. I was coincidentally having lunch with a couple of guys today, and one was there and one was talking all about it. And
hilarious!
I had to do everything I could to say, well, I'm going to talk to Dana later on this week. I just had to listen and go, wow, really? I was playing dumb, and it was really fun.
Oh, that's so funny. No, it was great. It was so fun. My friend Jorge Ojeda asked me to do it. I was like, yeah, of course I'll do it. Those guys are great. They have a song called "You've Got to Fight to Survive on the Planet of the Apes." How could Dr. Z not host their show?
Yes.
Then he got into a fight with Dave Navarro because they were playing so loud.
Oh boy. I love talking with you about this stuff because it's like things we can never do and places we can never see, but we can imagine. And that's sometimes that's half the fun in life, is just kind of going there. And not everybody's nostalgic. You and I share that same.
Yeah.
And we can live in those spaces, and I love living in them with you. Thanks for.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I wanted to ask one other thing. I agree. And, it was just, and again, I think it's just the sense of fun about it. It's not, there's nothing cynical about it. It's, and what I did not know, speaking of Ed Wood, is that Bela Lugosi, one of the ways that he kept butter on his bread towards the end was he started appearing in spook shows and then had his own.
Yes. There's some great, if you go through that folder of the images I sent you, there's some really nice imagery.
I have one of those posters.
With the cape? Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oof.
Where it's clearly somebody else's hands. There's something really off about it.
I hope they are somebody else's hands.
Yeah, something really off about it.
Yeah, he was doing shows with, Dr. Neff, Bill Neff, and basically anyone that would hire him, he was trying to, God knows what kind of debt he'd acquired by then or where he was in his career, but it wasn't, that's how he was making his living. And I mean, it was a kind of a perfect match. I'm glad he got to, I'm sure people deified him. It was probably pretty low rent in many of these theaters. He's going as toilet, but maybe it was gratifying in other ways for him. But how cool would it be if you?
Yeah, when you need money, man.
Exactly.
I totally get that.
He was like, he's got a real rich history in spook, in the spook show.
There's also an ad, not the poster, but the ad of Vampira doing one here in LA.
Wow, really?
Yeah, which would be, it was with a movie. I think it was maybe The Black Sleep.
Oh my God.
And she did a live appearance. So this had to be 54 or 55.
It's during her TV show. That makes sense. She obviously her costume and
Wow. Now, tell me a little bit about where you're giving this speech. What is it called again? The
Philosophical Research Society, which is one of my favorite places in LA. It's right on Los Feliz Boulevard. Everyone, if you've been in LA, you passed it on your way to the Greek Theater or just.
Now, this is not the Center for
Inquiry,
which is now, I believe, a parking lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct. It's the same kind of thinking as a lot of this,
I was the first person on that stage.
You were? Did Amit bring you there? Amit Edelman?
But it was before Amit. It was the other guy, I forget his name, but I met him when he was a contractor. He was working on my house. And I opened that first show.
Wow, there's so much great history there, and luckily it's immortalized in Barry, the TV. Are you a Barry fan? Did you watch?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
So they recreated it in a soundstage, but they used the parking lot in a ton of shots. Obviously, that's where Winkler had his acting studio. And there's so many incredible variety shows, and I did my Zabrecki hour there for 5-7 years. But Philosophical Research Society, totally different place. A mystic named Manly P. Hall, a Canadian who came to L.A. in the 30s.
His name is Manly P. Hall.
Manly P. Hall, yes. Wonderful deep dive. I think you would appreciate the dive on him. Super interesting mystic man, a kind of outside thinker. And he had some benefactors that let him open up that place in the 30s. It's kind of a Mayan Egyptian. It's a beautiful building, big 150-seat auditorium. It's kind of like almost like a Largo kind of setting in there.
Wow.
And I've done my Zabrecki hour there a couple of times. And
this is on Los Feliz
Boulevard. Yeah, it's on Los Feliz Boulevard. Once you see it, you go, it looks like a temple or it's a church of some sort.
Right. Okay.
And again, it's been
is it near where the Center for Inquiry was?
No, it's because it's literally on Los Feliz Boulevard. So it's like it's like the residential street. So you're driving up from
the
park, you're going up to the Greek, or
right,
and it's over by Hillhurst or something like that.
Okay, all right, I know where you are.
Dana, it's amazing. They've got a bookstore. They've got some of the best programming of stuff I've ever seen in all my existence. All kinds of interesting talks, and some of it's on the mystical. A lot of the deep dives on obscure music artists. Oh
my God! How do I not know this place? Zabrecki hosts the Houdini seance at the Magic Castle, which is also a bit of a spook show.
Oh, definitely. Yes.
Yeah.
But leaning on the blackout being
right.
The seance at the Magic Castle is comprised of three parts, really. There's a dining element to it. And then the medium, myself, comes in, performs what's called a light seance in the light with the lights on.
Oh, okay.
No.
Like if you have something else later in the evening, you won't be weighed down by our seance.
No, not the weight. Just the lighting. It is, like as in sun and moon light. So it would perform 20 minutes of spooky themed magic, but done at light. And then the candles come down, the lights go down, people hold hands in the dark, and all hell breaks loose.
Right.
Blackout, right? You could very much equate it.
Very much like a seance, very much like a spook show blackout.
Yes, and I've done hundreds of these for the past 15 years.
Right, and it's ostensibly to get in touch with Houdini.
Always.
It is the Houdini seance.
Yes.
Who was the source, who was the subject of a famous real seance?
Exactly. Yes.
29?
36.
36. That's what I meant.
Yeah, you got it. Close enough. Yeah, his wife, he and Bess had a pact that whoever is going to die first, the survivor, conducts 10 seances, and then you can move on with your life. She does 10. The final one's in 1936 on the roof of the
Roosevelt
Hotel.
The Knickerbocker, right.
Yep, right there.
I'm wrong about everything.
You are right.
It was 29 on the Roosevelt, only 36 on the Knickerbocker.
You know what? It's so close. I should have just said yes. What does it matter?
It's the only way I'm going to learn.
Anyway, it was a phenomenal, strange seance because it was public. Prior to that, seance has been done in small rooms and parlors and things, but Bess holds this one. It's broadcast on the radio. It's strange. 250 people are there. It's got a massive guest list. The mayor of Hollywood's there. Was it 10 years after he died? Was that what it was? Yeah. Yeah. And then the quote was, Bess said, 10 years is long enough to wait for any man. Goodbye. Right. And she moved on.
God bless her. God bless her.
10 years. I mean, that's pretty good.
But you told me, we don't have to mention any names, but you told me that you were hired to do a seance, and the people who hired you, and these are people of means, these aren't hill people, were disappointed that you didn't really contact their dead relative.
Yes. And that's I won't say it's a common story, but it's one that seems to happen once a year. And with things like the internet and getting knowing about what you're getting into before you show up, I kind of got to say, well, you should have kind of read up on this a little bit, because I'm not here to contact Grandpa Joe tonight. And nor am I. And believe me, I've been offered large sums of money because people see my gaunt visage and they go, oh, come to our house and for 10 grand, raise Rusty, the old dog. And you're like, well, that sounds appealing and fun and maybe interesting, but no.
Yeah. It also is not going to work.
It ain't gonna work. Yeah. I got a couple secret assistants and a
yeah.
You know, and
it's
some
a show.
Yeah, exactly. I'm in it for the show, and I'm not exactly a believer. So I just love the theatricality of all this.
It's a show. It's a show. It's fun. To that end, do you? It's funny. Stephen King always would never be home on Halloween because it was just like too much. It was like a hat on a hat. Do you have big Halloween plans, or do you work so much in October that you don't have? Do you do anything? Do you get to do anything for fun? Not that your work isn't fun, but do you ever like Universal it or?
No, I've been booked the past 20 years on Halloween doing in one city or another, and it's awesome, and I very much enjoy it. I like to be, knowing that I'm the entertainment at that moment for people that are going out for this kind of entertainment. And because I do this all year round, I think no one asks for their money back. People generally like what I'm doing.
Sure.
So I think that I think that like, oh, this is I got a good thing, whether it's a small event in a private home somewhere in the hills, or it's for 1,000 people at the Mayan or whatever whatever that is. I just love it. So far, I've been really lucky, but maybe in the future I'll end up, passing out candy. I don't know.
To me, when I say Halloween, I just mean the whole season. Like, do you ever go? You did the haunted hayride.
Sure. Oh God, yes. And all that. My wife and I, we go walk around, and Toluca Lake is a joy to walk around.
Oh, it's the best. Yeah, that's what I like. And my Halloween starts in September and just goes.
I bet.
We do Plan 9. And then, but then on Halloween, taking my kids out trick or treating was always like the greatest thing. And now my youngest is too cool. So
where would you take them? Because you're up in the.
We would go to Valley Village. We go down to Valley Village, and Colfax Meadows is really just this beautiful, like this 4 or 5 blocks. Everybody tricks out their house, and it's great.
Yeah, I love that it has become more of a thing in American culture in recent years. And Toluca Lake is a really nice place to go because people have the means to spend money on some of these installations that they create. Sometimes
they really go nuts, and it's really beautiful.
Yeah, so we walk around there. Like we'll just take a night stroll 4 or 5 times over the season. Hit Bob's Big Boy, and then cruise around, and just it's wonderful. It's nice to be alive. But then you kind of feel like you're living in a good place and time.
Right. Exactly. Well, to be continued.
At the Room.
I will. Okay, we're going on a date.
Yeah.
We're going on a boy date.
Romance. The bromance continues.
The bromance continues. Thanks, man.
This is Orson Welles, ladies and gentlemen. Out of character, to assure you that the War of the Worlds has no further significance than as the holiday offering it was intended to be. The Mercury Theater's own radio version of dressing up in a sheet and jumping out of a bush and saying boo. Starting now, we couldn't soap all your windows and steal all your garden gates by tomorrow night, so we did the best next thing. We annihilated the world before your very ears and utterly destroyed the CBS. You will be relieved, I hope, to learn that we didn't mean it, and that both institutions are still open for business. So goodbye, everybody, and remember, please, for the next day or so, the terrible lesson you learned tonight. That grinning, glowing, globular invader of your living room is an inhabitant of the pumpkin patch, and if your doorbell rings and nobody's there, that was no Martian, it's Halloween.
This has been the Dana Gould Hour, brought to you by the Internet. Music by Andy Paley, with Jake Posner behind the board. Produced by Jeff Fox. Graphic design and web production by Spencer Hunt and Segan Friend. Sound editing and post-production by Jalinda Palmer and Joe Napolitano. Hey, if you enjoyed the show, why don't you drop us a line at show@danagould.com.